point of concern. Right now, it's within the range of the RBI's scale, as it were. It's at 5.6% in the month of December. The government is also hoping to narrow the fiscal deficit, and that's going to be a challenge. The glide path says 4.5% by 25-26. Can the finance minister stick to the glide path? The challenge, steering growth, making sure that growth is in the high digits, 7% plus, creating jobs, focus on affordable housing. That, of course, is a big electoral plank as well, the PM Awas Yojana. Infrastructure investment. Remember, in 2014-15, when the Modi government came into office, infrastructure spend was a little over 1 lakh crores. Right now, it's 10 lakh crores in the last fiscal. Yes, you could argue that some of it is unspent, some of it has not been implemented, but to try and make sense of what this budget means, is it going to be a political budget? Is there going to be fiscal restraint? We're now going to be joined by the best set of experts in the studio and outside. Here in our studios, consulting editor with Network 18, Rahul Shivshankar, is joining us. Gautam Chikkarmane is vice president with the Observer Research Foundation. Gaurav Chaudhary is consulting editor with Money Control, and we'll also be joined in a moment by Nalan Mehta, the editor of Money Control. Rahul, let me start with you first. What are the three big things that you're going to be watching out for in Nirmala Sitharaman's budget?
Well, Zaka, good morning. Good morning, viewers. Look, we've been talking about this word populism, but for Modi, populism has been more in the exception than the norm. Let's be honest, except for the Kisan Samman Nidhi scheme that was announced with some fanfare. Nothing really giving away in that manner that we have seen in the past. Yes, there has been off-budget expenditure, but that has been deemed necessary. Is there room for populism is perhaps the question that we should be asking fundamentally. How much room is there? And let me just talk you through a few numbers. You talked about the fiscal deficit. It needs to be at least consolidated in this budget to about 5.4% of the GDP by some estimates. Some people say that, look, we're at 5.9%. We need to stay within range so to get to that glide path that you talked about, which is around 4.5% less than 4.5% ideally. Consumption-led growth is a bit of a problem. You can ask anyone and they will tell you that there are huge lacunas on that side of the fence. The government might want to put a positive spin, will throw out some numbers, but not to sound like I'm trying to poop the party. But yes, there is a consumption-led growth deficit, and we have to address that. Revenue expenditure has held steady at about 12%, if I'm not mistaken, of GDP. Many people say the time has come to sort of rein that back, but I don't know. You talked about politics. All that money that is going to be spent on salaries and pensions, etc., can you actually rein them in when opposition governments are going back to the old pension schemes, etc., etc.? So there's a problem area. And of course, there is welfare spending, which is adding to the kitty. So we were just told, for example, on fuel, fertilizer and food, all those numbers are holding steady. They're not going down, they're in fact going up. And that is a fundamental problem. So populism, I don't know. There might be some giveaways to the middle class. There might be a focus on women. Women really need a leg up because, as you know, female labor participation is very low. In fact, India is even lower in that metric than Bangladesh and Pakistan. And unfortunately for us, that number is going down. And many people have said that if you bring more female participation into the economy, you see growth, not exponentially, but certainly you see a lot of growth,
I think it's
1% or 2%.
25%, the
yes,
female labor participation
and the number
rate.
is that you get more than 1.5% if women come in to the economy. So, you're talking about some fundamental numbers, and we'll have to see how those are going to be balanced. It's been interesting because this is the first budget which gives you a look back 10 years, a decade, and gives you a fair account of how the government is done.
It really is a vote on account. That's what it's called, a vote on account, the interim budget. It's not a full budget. It's also a good time to bring in Gurcharan Das former CEO of Procter & Gamble, and also Rakesh Nangia, taxation expert, is with us. Let me bring in Gautam Chikarmani. Our reporters are also spread across the length and breadth of the national capital before the finance minister first leaves her residence, then goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan, meets the president, and then, of course, the cabinet gives its stamp of approval before she reaches the Lok Sabha. But Gautam Chikarmani, what is at stake in this budget? Clearly, you have an election coming up in the next couple of months. Nobody can wish that away. No, incumbent government wants to not come across as, okay, we're giving this and this and this for our voter blocks. But at the same time, one of the defining features of this government has been, even during the COVID years, to try and be as fiscally prudent as possible. Is it possible to be prudent in a political year and an election year?
You're probably presuming that this budget will come out with new expenditure or raise new revenues, etc. This is just a vote on account, in my opinion. The best that I see is that Nirmala Sitharaman, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman ji, will talk about the past 10 years of the UPA, of the NDA government.
She might talk about the UPA.
Is that a Freudian slip? Or?
She probably will talk about the UPA, but not in very cheery terms. There'll only be a reference, negative reference benchmark.
And I think the government has done a remarkable job of steering the economy, particularly during the COVID times, due to which the fiscal deficit today stands high. There will be a lot of talk about how this government has steered the economy. There will be numbers, for instance, on digital, on fiscal, on economic growth, and that India is now close to a $4 trillion economy, world's fifth largest, going on third. Some people say it will take 1 or 2 years. I think, to me, it seems in less than 1 year we will cross. We will become the world's third largest economy. Germany has just crossed Japan. Because Japan, the currency depreciated, so Germany is now the third largest economy, and India will cross that. So all indicators, all celebration, all reforms that the government has done, for instance, GST, IBC, digital, etc., will be talked about as the past. But I also think that she will talk about, it will be an election budget, not in terms of SOPs or giving money here and there, but it will be an election budget in the sense of presenting a vision. Of what the government proposes to do, what the government hopes to do. Yesterday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said, when we return back, it's almost as though they are coming back and,
Are they not?
I really don't know how to read those signals other than accept what he's saying. There will be talk about where the government wants to take, what the economic vision of the government is. They have talked about becoming a developed country, let's say $20,000 per capita income by 2047. Which means a $30 trillion economy. So I think all the pathways to that $30 trillion economy, to a $20,000 per capita income, I think she will be talking about. It should be a fairly long budget, but I don't think it will do very much in terms of changing tax rates or in terms of new expenses. It will be a vote on account.
Gaurav, the reason why we're saying this, obviously no government can afford to ignore the electorate or what the electorate wants or is looking for. If you go back to the 2019 interim budget, that's when the Kisan Samman Nidhi got announced. And that was a big sort of defining feature of that budget. Whether or not it had an electoral impact, I guess Nalin will be better placed to say. But do you see something of that sort? Do you see an expansion of the Samman Nidhi that's being given to farmers? Do you see, for example, Ayushman Bharat's coverage increasing? What is it that the government, because it needs one big headline out of this budget to go to the people with?
Absolutely, but there's a fundamental difference between 2019 and now. If you look, in the run-up to the 2019 interim budget, the government this party had lost the 3 state elections.
True.
In 2024, when the government is presenting the interim budget, it's riding high on winning those 3 states. So there is no electoral pressure, as it were, for the government to come out with any kind of a scheme, a new scheme for that matter. But so far as the PM Kisan scheme, even if you index it by inflation, I think it's up due for an appraisal. So 2,000 rupees, 6,000 rupees a year. I think even if you index it by inflation, I think a 50% rise is due over a 5-year period. So I would not be surprised if it goes up by to about 9,000 rupees a year for the eligible farmers. But I would expect the finance minister, and I would agree with Gautam that the government is going to give a very glowing account, a very stirring account of of what it has achieved over the last 10 years, particularly how, the progress that the economy has made in terms of various markers, both economic as also socio-economic. But more than that, I think that there will be a very nuanced attempt to actually trying to de-link budget making from long-term policy making. So I expect the finance minister to expend a considerable amount of time talking about Viksit Bharat, and I wouldn't be surprised if Viksit Bharat turns out to be one of the major keywords of a speech. And as the Prime Minister said, there are going to be four Amrit pillars, as it were: Gyan, Garib, Yuva, Annadata, and Nari Shakti. So essentially, poor, youth, farmers, and women. And the whole idea would be to try and decouple the annual budget making activity from long-term policy making, so that policy making mind space gets freed up from budget making. Right now, all of it is either linked to the electoral calendar or to the annual financial calendar. I think that needs to be freed up, and that is what the Prime Minister has been emphasizing for quite a long time. Viksit Bharat, something I think is going to.
Before I come to Nalin, and we have Gurcharan Das and Rakesh Nangi also joining us, I want to go across to our reporters. Pallavi is joining us from outside the Finance Ministry. I believe Sharon is also there with us, so is Anshul. Pallavi, you are a veteran of covering the Finance Ministry. Tell us what to expect through the course of the next few hours. The minister comes out of her residence, she goes and meets the Rashtrapati. I believe there will be a meeting of the cabinet in Parliament as well, where they will give their approval to the budget. And then, of course, at 11 o'clock in the morning, she will stand up in the Lok Sabha to present the budget. How and why is this different from any of the other budgets that Nirmala Sitharaman has presented so far?
Well, first of all, the good news which really came in for the government yesterday was the GST figures were released, and that was at around 1 crore 72 lakhs. And according to the figures which have been put out by the Finance Ministry, it's the highest, 10.4% growth that they've seen in the GST figures. There have been naysayers about the GST. I think these high figures and the growth essentially gives credence to the government's claim that there's been increased transparency. People are paying those taxes, and there has been a lot of I would say consumption, and therefore demand, and therefore those who say that there has been no economic growth or green shooting on the economy, that's not true. And I think those are the figures which are also going to be rattled off by the Finance Minister herself. The schedule is very simple. At roughly around 9 a.m. is when she's going to be walking out of the Finance Ministry. Since late last night, actually, Zaka, as per protocol, everyone goes incommunicado. No officer is going to be speaking. No one is going to be speaking out, because that's the way it goes. So 9 a.m. is when she's going to walk out of her office at North Block along with the entire team. Those pictures have already been put out since late last evening. She then goes to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. She presents the budget's copy first to the Rashtrapati, and then she enters the Parliament roughly around 9:50 a.m. to 10 a.m. What happens is, as per protocol, is that the budget has to be cleared by the cabinet. That's a very small procedure. That's a technicality. Once the budget is prepared, she sits for a meeting or a short one with the Prime Minister, and then at 11 a.m. sharp, she comes out with her Bahi Khata, and very quickly, when she just enters the Parliament, you're going to see that photo op, something which has made her stand apart. She is the one who introduced the concept of Bahi Khata to make the point that we are overthrowing the colonial legacy. It's all about Indian system, and I think the main focus of the budget, obviously, which everyone has been talking about, is a growth story. Women, of course. I mean, just very interestingly, a day before, the government launched its own program about coming out with a survey which talks about better job opportunities for women, whether it's white collar, whether it's blue collar, and the most important fact which the government is insisting on now is a kind of pay parity, whether it's manual labor, whether it's white collar labor, to make the point, if man and women are working the same kind of a job, there should be no pay discrimination, better facilities, essentially to ensure that a Viksit Bharat, a Sakshat Bharat requires a Nari Shakti. I think this is going to be one main pitch of the Finance Ministry's vote in account, or the interim budget as it's called.
All right, I think the government's report card yesterday also suggested that there's a 75% increase in the number of women with bank accounts. But what does all of this mean at this point of time, 2 months before a Lok Sabha election? Let me ask Nalin Mehta this, and I think Gaurav referred to the last time there was an interim budget in 2019. The political scenario then was different, because the Modi government had lost 3 assembly elections. There was still, uncertainty over whether they will come back in the 2019 election. This time around, 2023, they've won the 3 heartland states. They are in a politically much more comfortable position. Does that necessarily mean that there will be less populism, welfareism in this budget, or that's not the playbook of the Modi Sarkar?
So, Zaka, I think we all know that with this Modi government, I don't think they're going to take any chances, and I don't think they leave anything. I mean, you just look at what's happened with Nitish Kumar in Bihar, for example. So it doesn't matter how strongly the government is placed before the election vis-a-vis 2019. This is fundamentally an election budget. It's the last one before the elections. So I think we are at Money Control, for example, we've been looking at. I think the expectation is on 3 or 4 counts. Fundamentally, the first is on welfare. Last time, I think Gaurav mentioned PM Kisan came up, so there could be something around expansion in PM Kisan, possibly, we don't know. The second is around PM Awas, which is one of the signature schemes of the government. There could be something around the urban component of that. I think the third thing is around government capex. The second thing. And the third is around the India's energy transformation, which has also been significantly part of the signature themes of the Modi government. Fundamentally, I think Gaurav alluded to this as well, that while this is a vote on account and while this is an interim budget and the big budget will come after the elections, but if there's one thing we know about the Modi government is that the absolute ruthlessness and not taking anything to chance. And I think what we do expect is that in response to the larger caste census thing, the Prime Minister's idea of 4 castes, women, poor, youth and farmers, I wouldn't be surprised if the budget is kind of addresses each of these constituencies in at least in the political framing of it. I think you're going to see a litany of achievements of the last 10 years and a vision statement for the term forward with a few things added at critical points.
All right, so these 4 different and disparate classes of people, there will be a greater focus on them in this budget. Let me bring in Gurcharan Das. You know, Gautam and Gaurav were referring to the headline picture. The headline picture is India is a little over $3.5, almost $4 trillion, expected to get to $5 trillion by the end of 25-26, and by the end of the decade to $7 trillion, in the 3rd largest economy in the world. What does that necessarily mean? How much transformative does that have to be for the ordinary Indian? Because you're looking at, what, per capita right now around $2,000 a year. If you were to make a 10x jump from $2,000 to $20,000 a year, what is the transformation that needs to happen, Gurcharan Das?
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with those people who say this will not be a different sort of budget than the ones that we've had for the last 4 years. You know, I personally feel that the finance minister has done a pretty good job. The infrastructure spending, capex orientation is a growth orientation, job creating orientation in the long term. And it's been done in a fiscally responsible way. Now that has been the hallmark for the, so why give up a legacy which has yielded you reasonably good growth, made you a high-performing economy, and set us on the stage for the long term. Now, for the long term, to get to that developed economy status, you'd need to grow at 8%. And frankly, that is a disruption because for the last 30 years, the average growth rate for the country since 1991, since the reforms, the economy has grown at close to 7%. That's damn good for a democracy, you know, and we should be proud of that. But why we have failed, what is wrong with that model is that we haven't created the jobs that 7% growth should have created. And that's because we haven't created an industrial revolution. So that is really the most important thing, that you can't just jump from a green revolution to an IT revolution. We have to go through the middle step. Otherwise, how do you take 45% of your people who are in agriculture, surplus, many of them, into higher productivity jobs, higher income jobs? That is to make ourselves a middle class country, which is what developed economy means. We have to do that. And fortunately, the conditions today are far better than they were in 1991. Your infrastructure has improved vastly. The road mileage is doubled since 2011. Port handling capacity has quadrupled since 1991.
Okay.
And others, the whole digital revolution has improved the ease of doing business. So there's a lot going for us to achieve it, but it does need to we have to do the reforms that are required. But as far as coming to the budget today, I would say, well, it's a vote on account. It's an interim budget. There'll be a lot of words, but I don't think there'll be a substantial change from the sensible path that the country has pursued, which is a high capex,
All right.
deficits under control, meeting deficit targets. Particularly now we are linked, you see, with the bond market, the global bond market. And with that, our sovereign ratings could improve if we are fiscally prudent. Therefore, there has to be an eye on that. And my only big disappointment, let me just before I close, let me say is privatization.
Yeah.
We have done a damn good job of raising taxes. I mean, it is amazing that we have risen in the last 2 decades, from 3 lakh crores to 30 lakh crores, 10 times in terms of revenues the government has achieved, but the failure is privatization. Imagine if you had one more revenue stream to work with. That's the kind of thing that will give you 8% growth. I would have a ministry of disinvestment, have a guy like Shori at the top, and make those people accountable. It's really very sad. The people in charge of disinvest, particularly when the economy is, and the market's hot. So it's a good time to sell.
Yeah, let me take that point to our guests here in the studio. You can take any yardstick, whether it's tax collections, GDP numbers, but there are 2 bugbears that Mr. Gurcharan Das has pointed. One is jobs, we'll get to that, and privatization. You look at disinvestment numbers, consistently the government has not been able to match the disinvestment numbers. I think the last big one we saw was Air India. But even in today's speech, I don't think she'll be able to match what was the target for last year? It was 1 lakh crores plus?
64,000.
64,000 crores. You think she'll be able to match that?
Well, look, Zaka, there is no real point here trying to project. My point here, as I began by saying, was that we can look at the top line numbers and feel extremely happy with things. And, there is a reason. I think most people here would agree that the government has done a fantastic job on cleaning up, the budget numbers. We have more transparency. The banking system is cleaned up. But there have also been, of course, some big misses. You have a jobs problem. You can try going into denial about it. You can say, well, this number and, MOSPI numbers are more accurate than that number. But look at what you're doing on the ground. You have increased your food subsidy, or you at least said that we'll continue it for the next 5 years. That's a huge imposition. Why are you doing it? Because there is a need. There is a feedback coming from the ground, and this particular government is very attuned to what people are thinking, and that's why they win elections. So they know that there is a problem there. 40% youth unemployment. You have a huge number of people working in the rural economy, which is exactly what you don't want if you want those 8% growth numbers. Now, why do you have that problem? You have that problem because growth hasn't been equitable. And because of that reason, you find yourself flagging in a key metric, which is consumption. Look, at this moment in time, with the way the global economy is, you're not going to have export-led growth to the point where you could have expected to be 5 or 6 years ago. So you need that consumption. Women are not in the economy in the numbers that you think should be satisfying. Youth are not in the economy. Look at what happened just the other day. The Israeli government says that, look, we need people to work.
Yeah.
And look, you can say that the media is biased, this, that, the other, but when you go to the ground and you ask those people, why are you lining up, risking your lives? They say, what do? We'll die of hunger. So let's be honest. I'm not saying that, look, anyone has a magic wand. And I think what Mr. Modi has done and his government has done is fantastic. They've kept a very clean sheet, really. They've been very tight on the economics. You have a fiscal which is manageable, but there are pressures. You talked and someone talked about us being a democracy which is receptive to, obviously, political pressures. But as a democracy, we've done fantastically. I think Gurcharan Das made the point that as a democracy, we've done fantastically, growing at around 7%, which says a lot. But there are pressures, and sometimes, populism requires you to give in to those pressures. And that can lead to a few complications. And there is, I have enough data here to talk about the complications, but fundamentally, I think that's where the problem really lies.
Gautam, you want to respond to that, and then we'll show one of the things that the government seems to have done well is on managing its fiscal sort of space, big picture, but on the point that Rahul was making.
I think this jobs problem, frankly, the data is all distractory for now. There are various kinds of data. But let me just take one step back. Jobs, do you want more government jobs, and hence you will take a job only when there is a government job, then go to hell. What the government needs to do is to invite private sector investment, which is lagging, as we discussed last night. But perhaps that's the case where public sector investments begins the capital expenditure journey, and then the private sector follows. Maybe the private sector is waiting for elections to get over.
Sorry, give me one moment. I think these are pictures of the MOS Finance. I believe the MOS Finance is just leaving his residence. The two of them will go, Gautam knows this very well, this is the drill, right? The two of them go to Nirmala Sitharaman's residence, and then from there, all three go to the North Block. How does it work?
So all of them then go to North Block. Then all the secretaries, there is a photo opportunity, and from there they collect the papers and go to the Parliament. Then there is a cabinet meeting. The cabinet formally approves the budget before the speech is read out.
And she goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan.
She goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan, and then it goes to Parliament. Then they go to Parliament House. In Parliament, the cabinet approves this, and then she goes to present the budget at 11 a.m.
All right. Spare a thought for those reporters out there as well. It's a pretty chilly morning there in Delhi. But yeah, Gautam, go on, please. Make it.
Chilly and wet also.
Yeah.
It's raining.
At least we can see people.
Yeah. So
the fog has cleared.
I think the problem, if any, in terms of a policy gap, is in terms of being the inability to invite private sector investments. Now, I think the government has done enough over the past few budgets, for instance, reducing income tax rates, corporate tax rates, etc. So to that extent, on the taxation front, which is the mandate of any budget, except this one, because this is an interim budget, the government has done okay. But why is private sector investment not coming in? First thing is perhaps capacity utilization is still not 100%. So unless it touches 100 or 110%, to put in new capacities, it may not be a wise decision. On the other hand, I can see large companies investing. So perhaps this is a problem for smaller or mid-sized companies in terms of their capital expenditure. The final point, and this is very close to my heart, is that I think the regulatory infrastructure upon which compliances, filings, etc. are based is still like we want you to come create jobs, but please we don't like you very much, kind of an attitude.
And it's been like you come, make your jobs, but you got 100 papers to file before you create those jobs.
And laws
there are 69,000 compliances at an aggregate that companies have to, not too many, of which 26,000 carry jail terms. Now, the Jan Vishwas bill that came last year, it removed 113 of them. But Jan Vishwas 2, Jan Vishwas 3 is a work in progress.
But there are also tariff hurdles, isn't it? I mean, we're such a protected industry ecosystem. But obviously,
evening.
If you want to go out and forge equations and sign up treaties, etc., you are very short of where the world expects you to be.
I think the government is looking for those. This is a government that tries to build consensus and seek out solutions. It asks what the problems are and then tries to fix those problems. So today, the problem today, in my opinion, is a hyper over-regulation of companies, particularly the small-scale sector, which the moment it gets into a regulatory framework, increases the cost of its compliances by a huge number. So I think if the government can focus on that, and the budget is not the place for that.
Just give me a moment, Rahul, because we have to take a break. We have commercial considerations which we cannot ignore. But as we take the break, the pictures of the two MOSs for finance entering the North Block. We'll take a quick break, but do join us right back for our continuing coverage. We're counting down to the Modi government 2.0 final budget before the elections. It's budget before ballot right after this break.
I'm Bhagavati Kirtana. I'm a college student and I'll be graduating my college within 2 months. So as a student, what I expect from this budget 2024 is that several initiatives should be taken, or I expect it should be taken in enhancement of skills sector. Like students should be provided with several policies where their skills can be enhanced, and also employment opportunities should be boosted so much, because that's what the next is. And even for higher studies, for PG things, the entrance exam, the coachings, it should be enhanced so much. And more than education, skills should be focused more. Then as a person, as a citizen of the country, I feel like with the inflation thing, the inflation, as the price of the basic necessities has increased so much, and that should be controlled, and that is one of my expectation in that. And also considering the agriculture sector, the subsidies should be increased for the fertilizers. And regarding the food sector also, the distribution system and the food storage system should be increased. I mean, it should be enhanced, or it should be maintained properly. That's what the thing is. And yeah, as a citizen, what we expect is that the price should be reduced. Yeah.
My name is Seshagiri Raj. My expectation on the upcoming union budget is the government should reduce the tax burden on the new tax regime. I had to opt for the new tax regime of no choice. Like now, after choosing, like I came to know that there has been excess tax that has been detected on the new tax regime.
I am Padmanabhan, retired manager from Indian Bank and also a social activist. And regarding the budget which is being presented tomorrow, though it is an interim budget, some expect some announcement, some say only after election announcement may come. Anyway, whatever be the situation, what we expect from the budget, I will tell you. And instead of usual conventional way, the more important point in a different way I would like to present today is, that is, India's power in its youth. So youth empowerment is very important at this stage for a future strong India economically as well as socially. So to encourage this, more women as well as men entrepreneurs, particularly more women entrepreneurs, have to be inducted for startups, because now there are many venture capitalists who are willing to come into the display when these people who are capable, they don't have finance and all. So on government, if they give more shops to this line, there will be more new startups and more new intelligence, particularly in technical field, more so in the field of artificial intelligence. You see more women entrepreneurs. So actually encouraging these people for more entrepreneurship and more startups and more venture capitalists will help everyone to be independent instead of merely depending on jobs. Of course, providing jobs is base that cannot be ignored, and for this government should attract more big industrialist investments and foreign investments and all, and improve employment opportunities. Then one more important thing is in the field of agriculture, instead of the usual subsidy fertilizers which they give, that they should continue, but modernization in the equipment farming and novel methods of farming are more important, for which the government should take some brave steps to provide more funds to the agriculturists who want to introduce modern formation, and also setting up of more institutes for training them to novel methods of agriculture and farming, which will increase the productivity. So this is also equally important. So youth empowerment and agriculture. In addition to that, the usual thing, that is, we as senior citizen, we expect the medical insurance claim is steep, getting steep every year. So they should try to rationalize and reduce, and not only that, they should remove the GST on that, which is very unfair. Then similarly, the middle class, poor and all, they don't have money to spend. So much is tied the cost of living. they should have some good mechanism to control price rise and provide some money in their hands, and also the incentives on savings which they have scrapped so many things, they should be reintroduced so that domestic savings will be there. So these are all the things I feel we expect from the budget as and when all these things are.
It is the budget before ballot. It is the final budget of Modi 2.0 government before the elections in April and May. Expectations are high. Whether there is political and fiscal elbow room to fulfill those expectations, we don't know. But let's roll out our conveyor belt on our Stipe camera, 3D camera, to get you a sense of what the expectations are as far as various sectors are concerned. Let's start, of course, with agriculture, and the expectation there is some degree of subsidies for machinery and storage facilities. Remember, agriculture has been a bit of a bugbear. The farm laws had to be withdrawn. Whether or not 2 months before an election the government bites that bullet, unlikely. Let's go across to the next one. Expectation as far as infrastructure, and this is one area that the Modi government has done exemplarily well. Higher allocation for railways and roads, 10 lakh crores last year's allocation for capex, but will that be increased in an election year? We will wait and see. Also, let's go to the next sector and what the expectation is as far as the sector of education is concerned. Remember, the Modi government is trying to change the very framework of education in the country, the national education framework. Higher allocation for NEP is an expectation in this sector. Let's move on to the next one. And this is, of course, in the field of health, where the expectation is higher allocation for R&D and accessibility. Can we get to what is the developed sort of model of 3% or 4% of GDP allocation for health? Whether or not we'll get there, let's wait and watch. And the final one is in the field of banking. And this is again an area, because of the banking and insolvency code, where the government has done well. One area of concern has been on privatization. Public sector banks, there is no clarity on which of these public sector banks are getting chosen for disinvestment, for privatization. So these are the various expectations as far as the government is concerned from various sectors. But let me go across to both Gaurav Chaudhary and to Nalin Mehta, get a sense of, like I said, all right, Nirmala Sitharaman's first pictures are coming out. She's leaving her residence. Like I said, it's a wet and chilly morning in Delhi. She will be now headed straight to North Block, where she will emerge with what is called the Bahi Khata, or the Book of Accounts. And then from there, she will head to Rashtrapati Bhavan. She will present a copy of the budget to the president. And then in the Lok Sabha at 10 a.m., there will be the customary cabinet meeting, which will, of course, ratify the budget. And then she will present that in the Lok Sabha. So, Gaurav, just a word on, whether there is political and fiscal elbow room. That's a different conversation altogether. But on one of the areas the government has done well is infrastructure spending. I mean, you can see it in the highways, the number of kilometers per road, road per kilometers that are being paved every single day and so on. In this budget, do you expect her to top the 10 lakh crores, or there's going to be guidance for the fiscal year 24-25
without doubt
to be higher than 10 lakh crores?
One of the standout characteristics of this government's macroeconomic management over the last 10 years, there have been two standout characteristics. One is it has walked the talk on fiscal consolidation, regardless of the fact that there are two big, huge pandemic years. So when our fiscal deficit went up to 9%, now it has come down to about 5.9%. And it has set a medium-term target of 4.5% by 25-26. So if it has to meet that target, then this year, that is in 24-25, whether it's in the interim budget or in the full budget when it's present in July, that has to come down by 70 basis points. And I would not be surprised if she actually pencils in about 5.2% of fiscal deficit this year, because the government on its commitment on fiscal deficit, it has been unwavering. And so far as capital expenditure is concerned, it has started, and last year we saw how it went up by 33% to 10 lakh crore. It will obviously go up, but albeit at a slower pace. So I would not expect it to go up by 33% because the base has gone up significantly, but it's going to remain steadfast on its focus on capital expenditure, because the government, as Gautam said, the government believes that infrastructure is going to be the primary economic multiplier. It unleashes economic multipliers, and the government is going to do the heavy lifting there. If the government does heavy lifting, then the crowding in phenomenon, where private sector investment actually comes in, is going to set in at some point in time. there was some mention on Narega. Now, if you look at the Narega spending, it's very interesting. Barring 2021 and 21-22, where it went up to 1 lakh crore, that was the COVID year, 1,11,000 crore, then came down to 98,000 crore, and 22-23 it came down to 89,000 crore. Last year it has been brought down to 60,000 crore. The ostensible reason probably could be that the government wants people to actually move out of guaranteed government-funded job schemes to private sector created job schemes in areas outside of the villages, because essentially people who are seeking jobs in Narega schemes are landless laborers. So these landless laborers will have to come out of the villages, and that can come only when the government invests a lot in infrastructure projects, because that creates jobs. But on infrastructure, it's very interesting. The investment in infrastructure, particularly highways, have gone up significantly since, just to give you some numbers, 2019-20 National Highway Authority of India and Roadworks, the total budget was 77,983 crore. In B 23-24, it has gone up to 2,69,920 crore. And that's a massive jump. And large part of the capital expenditure clearly is going towards this. So what is the government doing? The government is saying that if I have to borrow, I'll borrow it on asset creation rather than on funding it on current expenses. And that's, I think, very good, prudent public finance management.
It's also a good time to bring in Nilesh Shah, member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council and also Managing Director at Kotak Mutual Fund, and Saket Mishra, economist and investment banker, is also joining us. Nilesh Shah ji, it is an interim budget at the end of the day. It is also the last budget before the general election, which is due in a couple of months. What sort of elbow room do you reckon, as we see the pictures of the finance minister leaving from her residence to North Block, what sort of fiscal elbow room do you believe the finance minister has? There are vote banks to cater to, and at the same time, there is a fiscal glide path that she needs to stick by.
Fiscal expansion is limited. India gets differentiated versus its peer group because of the prudent policies it follows. This year, tax revenue is higher than budgeted estimate, but divestment receipt is lower than budgeted estimate. More importantly, nominal GDP growth, the denominator on which fiscal deficit is calculated, is likely to be lower than the budgeted estimate because of the inflation deflator. More importantly, we have committed to the world that there will be fiscal consolidation by FY26. And as the previous panelist was speaking, we have to show glide paths to the world in terms of fiscal consolidation. It is going to be a tough mathematics, but if we focus on two areas, the asset monetization, as you mentioned, India is creating infrastructure investment at rapid pace. What we built between 2014 and 24 in infrastructure is almost double what was existing in 2013. Now it is time to monetize this asset so that we can create fiscal room. And second is divestment. Irrespective of what market condition is, bull, bear, no government has ever achieved divestment target. I think if we put little effort over there, we should be able to achieve our divestment target. And between asset monetization and divestment, we can create necessary elbow room for fiscal space.
All right. The finance minister has just reached North Block. She will, of course, be speaking with her colleagues, both the secretaries and, of course, the MOSs there inside North Block, after which they will all come out. She will, of course, show the copy of the Bahi Khata to the waiting press persons there and then head straight to Rashtrapati Bhavan, where she will present a copy of the budget to the President of India. And then after that, she will head to Parliament. The Cabinet will meet at 10 a.m. in the morning, and the Cabinet will give its stamp of approval for the budget. Let me try and see if we can go across to one of our reporters who's in North Block. Pallavi is there. Pallavi, just walk us through. The Finance Minister has just arrived there at North Block. What happens here on?
So just to give you a sense of where I'm standing, I mean, in this rain also, she just walked inside the finance ministry, and what she's going to do is she's just going to go up. The MOS finance, Mr. Pankaj Chaudhary, was already over here, finance secretary, revenue secretaries, all of them. And you can see that office right up there, which we are showing you. That's exactly where the finance minister's office also is. So she's going to be sitting there for a couple of minutes. And then around 9 a.m. was a time which has been given to us, where you're going to see pictures of her climbing down. She's going to be standing over here, right site where you're seeing with the entire team. They have been working round the clock over the last 1 month, and as I reported earlier, completely incommunicado till the budget is presented and tabled in both the houses. And from here, she goes across to Rashtrapati Bhavan, right over here. You can see that it's a short drive for her. She goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan, presents a copy of the budget or the vote on account as it's called to the Rashtrapati, and then heads back to Parliament, where on the steps of the new Parliament building, you're going to be seeing her presenting the budget. And this is going to be the first budget in the new Parliament building. So there are lots of landmarks really associated with the new Parliament building. And then there's going to be a mandatory cabinet briefing or meeting rather, which takes place. That's where that's the technicality. The vote on account or slash the budget is approved by the cabinet. And then at 11 a.m. sharp, she stands up to present the last budget or vote on account of this government before the elections.
All right. Whether or not there will be political considerations, we'll know at 11 o'clock when the finance minister presents the budget. Sakit Mishra is also joining us. So, a lot of things that the Modi government can take credit for, whether it's infrastructure spending, whether it is seeing through a pretty tumultuous period of COVID through 2020, 21 and 22. But I think one area where I guess the government doesn't get enough credit for is cleaning up public sector banks. When this government took over in 2014, the gross NPAs were in double digits. Right now, it's at a little over 3%, which is a decadal low. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has resolved more than 3 lakh crores of outstanding debt since 2014-15. Net NPAs are right now at under 1%. How easy or difficult was this, given, in 2013-14, India was part of what was famously called the Fragile Five?
Good morning, Zaka. Very difficult because I think there are two things that within this process that are quite important. One is that we went through the whole COVID cycle where clearly business was shutting down. And the second is that unlike in the past when we've had a sort of slightly knee-jerk actions being taken on the NPA front, this process has been done continually and smoothly. So it's not seen a bank suddenly getting into trouble. But again, and I think the IBC has been a great addition to the economy. Some of the restructurings that have come through have done well. But again, I mean, we need to be constantly vigilant. So I think it's hugely been important in terms of releasing capital with banks and allowing them to actually support the kind of business growth that the government's trying to get to.
All right. Just give me a moment. I'm going to take another break. But again, we'll come back to how much elbow room the government has. Yes, tax buoyancy is huge. 14 lakh crores plus is the direct tax collections as far as last fiscal is concerned, and 18 lakh crores plus in GST and other indirect taxes. I'm going to take a quick break. Does this tax buoyancy allow for more fiscal prudence, or will it allow for a greater degree of welfareism and populism, given that this is an election budget? Quick break, but keep right here. This is Budget Before Ballot.
I'm Bhagavati Kirtana. I'm a college student and I'll be graduating my college within 2 months. So as a student, what I expect from this budget 2024 is that several initiatives should be taken, or I expect it should be taken in enhancement of skills sector. Like students should be provided with several policies where the skills can be enhanced, and also employment opportunities should be boosted so much, because that's what the next is. And even for higher studies, for PG things, the entrance exam, the coachings, it should be enhanced so much. And more than education, skills should be focused more. Then as a person, as a citizen of the country, I feel like with the inflation thing, the inflation, as the price of the basic necessities has increased so much, and that should be controlled, and that is one of my expectation in that. And also considering the agriculture sector, the subsidies should be increased for the fertilizers. And regarding the food sector also, the distribution system and the food storage system should be increased. I mean, it should be enhanced, or it should be maintained properly. That's what the thing is. And yeah, as a citizen, what we expect is that the price should be reduced. Yeah.
My name is Seshagiri Raj. My expectation on the upcoming union budget is the government should reduce the tax burden on the new tax regime. I had to opt for the new tax regime of no choice. Like now, after choosing, like I came to know that there has been excess tax that has been detected on the new tax regime.
I am Padmanabhan, retired manager from Indian Bank and also a social activist. And regarding the budget which is being presented tomorrow, though it is an interim budget, some expect some announcement, some say only after election announcement may come. Anyway, whatever be the situation, what we expect from the budget, I will tell you. And instead of usual conventional way, the more important point in a different way I would like to present today is, that is, India's power in its youth. So youth empowerment is very important at this stage for a future strong India economically as well as socially. So to encourage this, more women as well as men entrepreneurs, particularly more women entrepreneurs, have to be inducted for startups, because now there are many venture capitalists who are willing to come into the that is play when these people who are capable, they don't have finance and all. So on government, if they give more shops to this line, there will be more new startups and more new intelligence, particularly in technical field, more so in the field of artificial intelligence. You see more women entrepreneurs. So actually encouraging these people for more entrepreneurship and more startups and more venture capitalists will help everyone to be independent instead of merely depending on jobs. Of course, providing jobs is base that cannot be ignored, and for this government should attract more big industrialist investments and foreign investments and all, and improve employment opportunities. Then one more important thing is in the field of agriculture, instead of the usual subsidy fertilizers which they should continue, but modernization in the equipment farming and novel methods of farming are more important, for which the government should take some brave steps to provide more funds to the agriculturists who want to introduce modern formation, and also setting up of more institutes for training them to novel methods of agriculture and farming, which will increase the productivity. So this is also equally important. So youth empowerment and agriculture. In addition to that, the usual thing, that is we as senior citizens.
Back to our continuing coverage. It is budget before the ballot. It is actually a vote on account, and it is going to be an account of the last 10 years of Modi Sarkar. So what is it that the Modi Sarkar has got right? Number one, we talked about this. Gross NPAs are down to a decadal low of just a little over 3%. The net NPAs are under 1%, and the trend is upwards. So that is a good sign. Return on assets is at 1.2%. Return on equity is at 12.9%, although in the last year or so, it's much more than the 13%. The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code has resolved more than 3 lakh crores of debt since 2016. Inflation used to be a pain point till some time back. Right now, it's within the RBI's tolerance band of 2 to 6%, although on the higher side, I think 5.6% for the month of December. The rupee, again, used to be a pain point in 2013, used to be one of the weakest currencies anywhere in the world. Today, at least compared to its Asian peers, it seems to be doing better. It's outperforming its Asian peers. As far as tax buoyancy is concerned, and we talked about this, the number of income tax returnees that have, the returnees who filed are 8.18 crores for 23-24. That is the highest that we've seen in terms of tax returns. Net direct tax collections over 14 lakh crores, again the highest, and net indirect tax collections, GST and other indirect taxes, 18 lakh crores for 23. Then there is, of course, the political sort of shade to this. You can call it welfareism, call it what you want. The Jam Trinity, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, Mobile, that has curbed corruption. The government's own estimate is 2.75 lakh crores of money has been saved from being swindled or siphoned off by middlemen. The amount that has been transferred in DBT, or direct benefit transfer, is to the tune of 34 lakh crores in the last 10 years. And this is a favorite area of Nalin Mehta as to how the jam trinity, welfareism meets technology. How has this changed politics for the ruling party and for the government?
It's completely changed the nature of our politics, this idea of Labharti politics. And just to give a sense of this, in the last 10 years, the number of schemes that have been that use direct benefit transfers to reach directly to put money directly into people's pockets, that's gone up from just about 28 to 434 in 10 years. The amount of money that's been spent has gone up by 38x. Now, if you add the amount of money which is put in kind as well, that is significantly higher. The fact of the matter is that this is a template that has changed politics as is. One of the reasons why the BJP has been consistently winning more than it's been losing, or doing better at elections than it did before in the pre-2014 period, is not just because of Hindutva. Hindutva is one part of the cultural politics of the BJP, but significantly because of this, which has led to the BJP becoming a party of the poor in North India in particular, in the rural Hindi heartland, and especially with women. And I think whether it's PM Awas, whether it was Swachh Bharat, the amount of housing that was built in women's names, that has significantly added new constituencies of voters to the BJP's to the BJP's corner, if you like. And this
why is this such a new phenomenon? This was available to all governments previously as well. How come?
So the reason why this is different is this was the coming together of the cheap mobile phone, the unique ID system, and cheap data. Now, this of course was set up in the Manmohan Singh period. Now, the first pilot for this was started in 56 districts, 1st of January 2013. When they tested it out, and Jairam Ramesh was that time the Rural Affairs Minister, when they tested it out, there were lots of issues with the direct benefit transfers. By the time they fixed it, the Congress loses power, Modi comes to power. There was a big question mark over Aadhaar, if you remember, soon after the Prime Minister comes to power. In July 2014, Prime Minister Modi takes a decision to completely give full political backing to the ramp up of Aadhaar and direct benefit transfers. So as a result, from 7,000 crores spent on direct benefit transfers in 2013-14 period, which was including Manmohan Singh's, it's now gone up to 2.5 lakh crores. That's a huge jump. So what I'm trying to say is that while the system existed, it had not been tested. The political genius behind this was to recognize the importance of it, give it full political backing, and to push it through. And that has changed the nature of politics. Now, of course, it's available to every single government. If you see Karnataka, for example, the Congress government did the single largest DBTO soon after coming to power when they couldn't get rice, right? When there was an issue around rice in the center. So yes, it is available to everybody. But the fact is that the BJP had first mover advantage on this on terms of scale. They also built their politics around it. And had a layer of political mobilization around it. Other parties are also replicating this, whether it's DFK or by the way, the Dravidian party started this much earlier in the south, right?
True.
But the direct benefit transfer thing is a unique coming together of technology and the welfare system, which has changed the nature of the Indian welfare state, I think.
Gaurav,
Can I just ask a question? Brilliant analysis, Nalin. What I want to know is that after a certain point, do good economic policies translate into good politics? There are several previous examples and I don't want to waste time on that, but I agree completely with you in terms of your data, in terms of your perspective, in terms of your analysis. But at some point, will a voter fatigue set in? If you have secularized poverty or if you have secularized DBT, will that secular vote, will that secularity vote economics, or will they continue to vote caste, or will they continue to vote religion?
I think that's a fantastic question, and thanks for asking that. I don't think people vote on just one issue alone. I think people vote as a matrix of multiple issues. Of course, see, the thing is that in the Hindi heartland, the benchmark was so low that, and the transformation, the rate of change was so high that it changed the nature of politics. It has not happened in the south, for example, where the levels of governance are much higher. Now, of course, when PM Awas, for example, if 17 million houses are built, 64% of them are in the names of women alone, or in the names of jointly in the names of them and their husbands, in a country which is deeply patriarchal, where women didn't have inheritance rights till a few years ago of parental property. Many of these women will vote for the party that they think is given to them at least once or twice. But soon, very soon, you're right, that's not going to be forever. And I think Mr. Modi recognizes that. Because once the expectation rises, once people start getting basic things, then of course they're going to ask for jobs, they're going to ask for multiple other things. And that's where the
I think if I can just add to that point, perhaps the answer is that your reliance on DBT over a period of time should decrease, in fact, because you're creating other alternatives for people to realize their aspirations. I think that's where the thrust will be in the next 5 years. And, you know, Mr. Modi's government has benefited from something that was started at the fag end of the UPA, just like the UPA benefited in one from what the NDA did. So, you know, there has been what is known as a trickle sideways effect, perhaps hasn't really gone
what I would like to point is the Mahatma Gandhi Narega scheme, which was started by UPS, which was a similar and perhaps the world's
But you have to ask yourself, why is Manrega sort of, you know, the allocations growing? That shouldn't be happening over a period of time if you've been in power this long. See, we're no longer talking about a government that has just come to power. We're talking about a government that has had now a fair run of it. 10 years, long time. Mr. Modi, if he wins the next election, will be aspiring to be the longest serving Prime Minister.
The point I wanted to make is that does good economic policies translate into
just look at the West. Just look at the West. There has been a saturation in the West to some degrees, let's say in Europe, when it comes to social welfareism. There's an X factor now that's working in Europe, and the reason you're seeing the breakup of traditional politics, liberal politics in Europe, is because that has not really been able to, the last 10 years, governments have not been able to deliver key components of the economy to the people, jobs, higher incomes, etc. So then there is a fallback on issues which are not really focused on economic well-being only, because that can't be your go-to jam, so to speak. So I think what the government is trying to do, and I hope it does quicker, is to broad base the way that you serve the public on the ground.
Rahul, just give me one second, Gaurav. Nilesh Shah will be leaving us after this. But Nilesh ji, do you want to weigh in on what the experts here in the studio are saying, that, you know, obviously one of the reasons why the Modi government has done so well politically is they realized and recognized the jam trinity and how beneficial it can be. DBTs, like I said, in the last 10 years, 34 lakh crores is what has been directly transferred to Labhartis. But does this have a ceiling, both from an economic point of view and also from a political point of view? Does the government now need to go beyond DBTs?
If you look at India, 1% of Indians enjoy lifestyle of French citizens with that kind of per capita GDP. About 27% of Indians have lifestyle of Indonesian citizen with that kind of per capita GDP. But more than 70% still lives in sub-Saharan Africa model. And with DBT, subsidies and all other things, we are still covering a reasonably small portion of that sub-Saharan Africa population. There is no option but for any government to create inclusive growth. If I have to sum up in one thing what this vote on account should do, well, it should push consumption at the bottom of pyramid to grow as fast as the top of the pyramid, and it should push private capex to grow as fast as government capex. If this vote on account or the budget next time can act as this to catalyst, our growth rate could reach into double digit.
All right, Nilesh ji, thank you very much for joining us. But, you know, I want to square off.
Just 1 second. Yeah. If we can sum this up, this conversation, 10 years in, short term, what the government needs to do, and long term. Short term, fiscal consolidation, boosting private consumption, jobs, GST upgrade, simplification of dispute resolution mechanisms. Long term, you can look at boosting farmer incomes, privatization. There is going to be, hopefully, if the government comes with a majority that they're predicting, room for that, political room for that. So you may not even need someone like Shori, as Gurcharan Das is saying. You will probably have somebody who will do the hatchet job for you. Labor and land reforms. And the fundamental question that needs to be asked in a country with scarce resources is whether the PLI scheme, someone needs to come and do a cost-benefit analysis of it. The government needs to tell us if it's actually working out and growing the tax base. I think that's how you should split this.
Gaurav?
So, on the success of the DBT, something that probably we ignore mostly is, and it's highly underrated, also is the development of the DPI, the digital public infrastructure, which is now called the India Stack. And there is no other country in the world there is no other tech stack in the world which has a country as a prefix. And UPI is the most visible symbol of that.
Which is why, by the way, they changed it to digital public infrastructure, because a lot of countries are issuing
correct.
that, right?
And so this has also led to increasing financialization. I'll just give you some numbers. In December 2023, total transactions through UPI stood at 18.23 lakh crore rupees. Monthly volume was 12.02 billion. The extent and the sweep of this change is unparalleled in anywhere in the world. And how has it led to more financialization? These are some numbers which I've taken some from proxy data. In the year 2023, last year, calendar year, Indian equity market added 15.69 million investors total, incremental, and Uttar Pradesh was leading the pack with 2.31 million, outgrowing Maharashtra.
So there are more investors who've come into the equity markets.
Heartland is getting savvy, financially savvy, and that means they're not locking up assets, they're not locking up money in unproductive assets like cash or gold, they're investing. And that money is showing up. So that is also showing up in household sector saving numbers. Say for instance, in 2014, total household sector saving was 22,85,301 crore. In 2023, it stood at 46,19,501 crore. All of these are adding up, and clearly the success of the DPI in delivering welfare schemes most efficiently directly in bank accounts, the technology aspect needs also to be flagged.
I want to add to what Gaurav is saying, and also to respond to Gautam's earlier point about does economics translate into politics always, and so on. If you look at Jan Dhan accounts, and this is also linked to UPI, a lot of people, when it was first set up, at that time financial inclusion in India was roughly around 15 to 20% by all international parameters. It went up to 80% roughly, according to the IMF and World Bank, in a 4-year period. So India essentially created somewhere around between 450 million to 500 million accounts plus in a 4-5 year period.
In 2014, 4 out of 10 adults in India did not have a bank.
Now, what that meant is, at the beginning there was a lot of mirth and derision about this. These are zero bank accounts, what's the big deal, and so on. But if you look at the data, most of these accounts, barring 10-15%, have an average of 3,500 rupees balance per month. They are active. By that definition, it means 2 transactions a month. That's gone up from 1,500 rupees on average per account to about 3,500 rupees. Now that kind of tells you the nature of shift in rural India and in poor India. Now, see, the Indian state always spent money on the poor. This government has not spent more money than that in numerical terms. It is that the money never reached, or if 85% didn't reach. Now what's happening is, and you also didn't really know where the poor are. They were on sheets, but now it's reaching directly. So now, to answer your question, economic versus politics, you build big dams, you build big roads, build big infrastructure. I don't think that translates necessarily into votes. So Chandrababu Naidu is an example of that. Many other governments are examples of that. But when money reaches people's pockets directly, that has a far more direct impact than any other larger idea of economic progress.
All right, just give me a moment, gentlemen. Just 1 second, because there are guests.
At very depressed levels of income. The fundamental point that we must make is that the DBI can also become a very quick pathway to inject quick relief, which is not where we want to be, actually. You want to give meaningful welfare to people, so there's a virtue cycle.
I also want to go across to a couple of guests who are joining us via satellite. We have Rakesh Nangia, taxation expert, and also Pawan Prabhat, who's a tech entrepreneur. Let me start with you, Mr. Nangia. In an interim budget, a budget that's coming a couple of months before election, do you believe that the finance minister has elbow room to either cut tax rates or even change and tinker with the tax slabs? There is expectation that it could go from the current 5 lakhs to maybe 7, maybe even 8 lakhs. Or would that be seen as imprudent from a fiscal point of view? Or does the fiscal buoyancy numbers that we just showed for our viewers, 14 lakh crores plus in direct taxes, 18 lakh crores of GST, does that give her room to change the rates of the slabs?
The root question that comes here is whether the government is really going to tinker the rates in the interim budget. And if you see the Prime Minister's statement yesterday, basically, where it looks likely no. But what I believe, the government may touch any one issue or two issues which has a massive effect on the majority of the population, of the needy class actually. So government is not going to tinker too much of the direct tax rates, too much of changes in the direct taxes, but may give 1 or 2 boosts which will affect millions of people basically. That could be one of the things which I believe. And the basic thing that the government can do it, tinker with the slabs actually, where you find thinking even a little bit of slab, you find, I can tell you in terms of number, it will affect 5, 7, 8 crore people. And how do I draw this thing? The total number of tax returns that were filed were 9.25 crores in last year. Out of this, 8.9 crores were individual returns. So individual returns are 95% of the total tax the government collected and the returns that are filed. So government may do something on the individual part, either raising the tax slabs or giving some incentive, some benefit which has not been touched, or it touches the life of the 8.9.
I also want to quickly ask you, Nangesab, between this old tax regime and new tax regime, are you seeing evidence that a lot more people are moving to the new tax regime? What is still holding up people from changing?
You see the changes that the government brought in the last year. When the scheme came, a new regime was not really successful, but government did brought last year quite a few changes, and it became a default regime. So if you do not opt, you automatically move into the default regime. So yes, it has made a difference. Government did bring in some direction. Yes, government is going to make it successful. I can tell you right now, government will give some more incentive, most likely in this budget, if not in the interim budget, to see that the new scheme becomes much more successful as compared to what it was in the past.
I also want to go across to Mr. Prabhat, but I believe we have a graphic on the startups and the unicorns pre-2014 and where it is now. So if we can play out that graphic either on the wall as we see pictures of the finance minister slowly coming out. So let's have those pictures up as well. So 4 unicorns, which is valuation. You're right. The finance minister has just come out. You can see her there with her red Bahi Khata. I believe if Pallavi is there, we can try and get Pallavi to talk us through these pictures as well. Pallavi, just take us through what you're seeing.
Okay, I'm just going to stay with the pictures. You can just see the finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman. She's got a Bahi Khata. That's her trademark, really. She's presenting, she's very, very clear that please don't call it an interim budget. It's actually called a vote and account. With the entire team, the MOS Finance, Pankaj Chaudhary, an entire team of finance secretaries, the revenue secretaries, especially the men who have been a part of the presentation of this vote and account. And what I really would like to say stands out is that lone woman who presenting her 6th budget consecutively, which itself is considered to be a huge record, and a strong messaging which perhaps goes in from the government as well. Their tagline is Shashakt Nari Saksham Bharat. Woman empowerment, I think, could be one of the main key points as far as the presentation of the vote and account is concerned. Over the last few days, we have been seeing the Prime Minister himself, the government itself, talking about, how the country also needs to become Atmanirbhar. Women need to become Atmanirbhar. So quite possibly a large chunk of the budget is also going to be focusing on that. Well, she's just going to get into a car, as you can see the pictures, accompanied by her team. And from here, short drive to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. She presents the budget, the first copy of the budget, the vote and account to the Rashtrapati. And again, then she goes back to Parliament. That's where the cabinet meeting is going to take place. That's a technicality, Zaka. The cabinet clears the vote and account. And around 11 a.m. sharp is when she stands up to present the last budget of this government before the Lok Sabha elections or the vote and account.
All right, the finance minister.
You can see those pictures, Zaka, even as I leave with you, that she's got into a car and she's a short drive for her towards the Rashtrapati Bhavan.
All right, I want Gaurav to sort of speak to these pictures as well. 2 things. One, the point that Gaurav Pallavi was making, that she's the lone woman, Nirmala Sitharaman, and the rest of the photograph is men, the secretaries, the MOSs. And this is her 6th budget. I mean, you wouldn't have wagered that when she started off.
This is a record. She's also the second woman finance minister. The first was Indira Gandhi, but she presented it when she was the Prime Minister too. And this is the first time a woman is presenting 6 successive budgets. It's a record of sorts. It's a record in itself. And that is something that, it's going to stay in the record books for quite some time now. If she comes back to power, probably that's going to set the record even higher. She goes back now to Rashtrapati Bhavan and Parliament, and then the cabinet approves it. The cabinet is slated to meet around 9:50, I believe. And then after that, there'll be a photo op also at Parliament as she enters Parliament with the MOS and the secretaries. And after that, the cabinet will approve it. That's a formality, but that's a requirement. And after that, she reads out the speech. It's going to be interesting to see how long the speech is going to be. The last interim budget had about 100 paragraphs,
Okay.
103 to be precise, I think. And generally, a full budget has about 300 paragraphs. So if you go by that yardstick of 2019, probably you're looking at about 100 paragraphs. So it's about 1.5 hours maximum speech.
The one point
98 paragraphs.
we should,
98.
when you look at those pictures, is the stability of that team. I think you'll probably be able to elaborate more on this. The team actually hasn't changed much.
That's true.
And that's quite unusual, isn't it?
That's quite unusual. And also, the finance ministry has a peculiarity in terms of appointment of secretaries.
Yeah.
The finance secretary is the first among equals. It is appointed by the finance ministry, as opposed to the rest of the secretaries in the other departments in the government of India who are appointed technically by the DOPT. In the case of finance ministry, all the finance secretaries, the finance secretary is the first among equals. There is no seniority there, and it has remained stable for quite some time. Somanathan is in his 5th year.
Yes. Which is unprecedented.
It is
And Mr. Seth also.
unprecedented in recent history, which kinds of tells you that the government believes in continuity. And one of the proximate reasons why investors come or don't come to certain geographies is also because of policy continuity, as explained and articulated by the policy makers. And in this case, the bureaucrats of the finance ministry are as much the ambassadors of the policies that the government of the day is crafting as the ministers themselves. And that is why, Somanathan's stint in finance ministry is going to actually stands out over the last 10 years because of the stability, and also not just the stability of policy making, but also the stability of faces, which is very important, because investors then get to know what is the thinking that is going on within North Block, which is the primary seat of policy making.
There they are, the three of them,
Yeah.
just behind Nirmala Sitharaman actually.
So
Zaka, this
it's
is
the
very
finance
interesting.
secretary, the revenue secretary,
Yes.
and the economic affairs
Yeah.
secretary. But Gautam, when we talk about historic budgets and the legacies of finance ministers, people talk about the 91 Manmohan budget, the 97 Chidambaram budget. Nirmala Sitharaman has presented 6 budgets, and 2 of them were in COVID years. What is her legacy? How will history remember her as a finance minister?
I think if you want a word, I think she will be remembered as a courageous finance minister. I remember the time, you will too, that during the COVID years, in the COVID months actually, there was a budget and the entire world was throwing money into their budgets. And there was a big demand from all over India, all across the world, that India should be spending more, India should be spending more. For Nirmala Sitharaman to take a decision that no, this is not the right time, the money will just vanish before we know it, because the brake and the accelerator cannot happen at the same time. I think that was the analogy that she gave. It takes a lot of courage to stand your ground and steer it, and then in hindsight come up right with it, that she did the right thing. So I think courage will be a very important determinant that will define Nirmala Sitharaman. The second would be her 2022 budget, which was quite revolutionary, quite remarkable in terms of, for instance, we were talking about privatization and all that, and not happening. Maybe the targets are not being met, but I think the sincerity of of where she wants to go, or where this government wants to take, in terms of keeping just 6 strategic sectors in which you will have 1 or 2 public sector companies and all others will be disinvested, is a solid stance. The focus on infrastructure, again, a mix of courage and momentum, because of what we see now. Anywhere you go, you see good roads. The last point I want to make is not about Nirmala Sitharaman, but the critique that perhaps she hasn't done enough disinvestment and so on, and there was this target and she hasn't met it. Fair enough. But if I examine it from the other side, the PSUs have done so phenomenally well. Their turnovers, their profitability, their capital adequacy in terms of banking, etc., is so good that in the markets, PSUs are one of the drivers of the market today. They have risen by about 60% over the past 1 year, while Sensex rose about 40 or 20%. So I think the fact that she hasn't been able to, whether that's an intended thing or whether it's a happenstance, we don't know. But overall, I feel that if she were to go for disinvestment post in
The
her
election,
July
yeah.
budget, in case they do come back, then I think the valuation that she would get for exchequers like us, who
Would be much higher.
are the stakeholders in these companies, will be much significantly higher.
Before I go to Gaurav, Mr. Prabhat has been waiting. So I want to bring up that startup number, the unicorns in startups. Before 2014, there were 4 unicorns. Right now, it's 114 from what I last checked. So if we can play that graphic and also bring Mr. Prabhat into the conversation. This has been one area of humongous transformation. There you go. That's the startup story. Up till 2013-14, there were 4. This is before the Modi government came into office. But look at the transformation in the last 10 years. It has now gone up. Overall, there are 113 unicorns that are valued at over $1 billion. 113, the total value of which is combined to more than $350 billion. But Mr. Prabhat, what this doesn't tell you is how bad, particularly the last year or so, has been for startups. There is a funding winter that's going on. Many startups have lost significantly in terms of their value. What are your expectations from the budget for the startup sector? And do you see this as a process of normal course correction, or do you see this as a bit of an aberration? And do you see, the India startup story going back to the strengths that we saw in 2020, 21, 22 almost?
I think this is just a course correction because during COVID, a lot of companies really took in a lot of money because the expectations were quite different. I mean, a lot of industries went digital and the companies and the funds really pumped in money. And I think after COVID, people went back to their offices, people went back to their schools. So I think it's really changed. I think it's a course correction in one sense. But at the same time, with AI coming into picture right now, and this is a much, much bigger force than what we have seen so far, much bigger than maybe internet, much bigger than maybe a mobile revolution. I think with AI coming into picture, I guess this number will again, go up. In fact, it will go north of 250, 300 anytime soon. All the companies which were really trying to work with so many analytics, so much data, they can do so much more with AI. And India being an IT hub already, it can become the powerhouse for AI revolution. And if you look at all the investments which are being done by countries like Singapore or even Saudi Arabia for that matter, not to mention Europe and US, I guess we are just on the course for the next revolution right now.
All right. Gurcharan Das also wants to come in on that point. The experts in the studio, Mr. Das, were talking about, unleashing animal spirits, private sector crowding in. I've been hearing this phrase for a while now, for about 4 or 5 years. Why is it that India Inc. is not investing to the tune that maybe even the government expects them to, despite, record corporate profits, one of the lowest corporate tax rates anywhere in this region? And also, look at the Sensex. It's all at record highs. Why isn't that private sector investment, that crowding in, happening?
That's a very good question. But let me just finish the point that was made by the excellent point made by the previous speaker. Let's on startups. What we have to, we are all of us unanimous that India is not creating the jobs that should be created at 7% growth. And we are mourning the fact that the industrial revolution has not taken place yet. I would just like to bring one statistic. There was a very famous study done by a professor at MIT in the 1980s, which showed that the maximum number of jobs created in the American economy over 30 years was not by the big giants or by the mom and pop stores, but by the startups, by the unicorns. And so I think before we leave the subject of unicorns, we should say that, yes, it's not just the number of unicorns, but we want those startups to become big. And when they become big, they create huge number of jobs. And that's really ultimate benefit to the nation. So I just thought it was worth underlining this fact that the importance of unicorns to the India story.
All right.
Now, about the question you've asked, Zaka, it's a very good question, and in fact, very hard to answer. The fact is that companies invest when there is a demand, when they run out of capacity, they expand their factories. And really, instead of, as it were, blaming the company, it really goes down to the issue of consumer demand. And so, if we can crack that, if the government can crack that issue, I mean, it has to happen, because you can't have 7% growth and not have enough consumer demand. And consumer demand, has been weak. I mean, there's no question about it. This is the quandary. How can you grow at 7% and not be creating the demand that should come? So I guess all the things we've been talking about, we still need to create that industrial revolution. A number of speakers have said we are still an over-regulated economy, and that hurts the small guy. The big companies can manage the regulation. They hire somebody and they manage those things. But a poor small guy is really burdened. And we still have that license, inspector, permit. We don't have licenses. We don't have inspectors so much. But that mentality in the bureaucracy is venomous. Is absolutely venomous.
Give me a moment. We have to take a break, but all those points are well taken. How much of this gets translated in the budget? What kind of elbow room the finance minister has? We will know when she presents the budget at 11 a.m. in exactly 90 minutes from now. I'm going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll be live at the CII with my colleague Shivani, and she'll be speaking to some CEOs from India Inc. on what their expectations are from this current round of budget. It'll also be a stock taking of the last 10 years of the Modi government and what it needs to do if it returns to power after the summer elections. Quick break. We'll see you live at CII right on the other side.
We expect the medical insurance claim is steep, getting steep every year. So they should try to rationalize and reduce, and not only that, they should remove the GST on that, which is very unfair. Then similarly, the middle class, poor and all, they don't have money to spend. So much is tied the cost of living. They should have some good mechanism to control price rise and provide some money in their hands. And also the incentives on savings, which they have scrapped so many things, they should be reintroduced so that domestic savings will be there. So these are all the things I feel we expect from the budget as and when all these things are announced as a soft measure. This the government should do. Only then the welfare of the country and the people in large will be will be bright only then. So this should be more important, should be given to youth, as I have already pointed out.
I'm Bhagavati Kirtana. I'm a college student and I'll be graduating my college within 2 months. So as a student, what I expect from this budget 2024 is that several initiatives should be taken, or I expect it should be taken in enhancement of skill sector. Like students should be provided with several policies where the skills can be enhanced, and also employment opportunities should be boosted so much, because that's what the next is. And even for higher studies, for PG things, the entrance exam, the coachings, it should be enhanced so much. And more than education, skills should be focused more. Then as a person, as a citizen of the country, I feel like with the inflation thing, the inflation, as the price of the basic necessities has increased so much, and that should be controlled, and that is one of my expectation in that. And also considering the agriculture sector, the subsidies should be increased for the fertilizers. And regarding the food sector also, the distribution system and the food storage system should be increased. I mean, it should be enhanced, or it should be maintained properly. That's what the thing is. And yeah, as a citizen, what we expect is that the price should be reduced. Yeah.
My name is Seshagiri Raj. My expectation on the upcoming union budget is the government should reduce the tax burden on the new tax regime. I had to opt for the new tax regime of no choice. Like now, after choosing, I came to know that there has been excess tax that is being detected on the new tax regime.
I am Padmanabhan, retired manager from Indian Bank and also a social activist. And regarding the budget which is being presented tomorrow, though it is an interim budget, some expect some announcement, some say only after election announcement will come. Anyway, whatever be the situation, what we expect from the budget, I will tell you. And instead of usual conventional way, the more important point in a different way I would like to present today is, that is, India's power in its youth. So youth empowerment is very important at this stage for a future strong India economically as well as socially. So to encourage this, more women as well as men entrepreneurs, particularly more women entrepreneurs, have to be inducted for startups, because now there are many venture capitalists who are willing to come into the that is play when these people who are capable, they don't have finance and all. So on government, if they give more shops to this line, there will be more new startups and more new intelligence, particularly.
आप तो जानते ही हैं कि जब चुनाव का समय निकट होता है तब आम तौर पर पूर्ण बजट नहीं रखा जाता है। हम भी उसी परंपरा का निर्वाह करते हुए पूर्ण बजट नई सरकार बनने के बाद आपके समक्ष लेकर के आएंगे।
Thanks a lot for staying with our budget coverage here on CNN News 18. I'm joining you from the CII gathering in the national capital. You're joining the broadcast with me, Shivani Gupta, and I'm joined with none other than Mr. R. Dinesh, President CII and Chairman TVS Supply Chain Solutions Limited. Thanks a lot, Mr. Dinesh, for your time. Is there a lot of anticipation ahead of this budget, or is there an understanding this is a vote on account and therefore there are going to be mild expectations?
Thank you, Shivani. I think if you look at it, there is an expectation that there will be continuity.
Yes.
And that this will set the direction for the budget later, right? So for us, I think considering all the geopolitical issues which have been there, the biggest concerns was what is happening globally. So if I look at it in that context, I think India obviously is in a very, I would say the most ideal situation. So continuity and making sure that there is a clear direction being set for the future is how we look at this interim budget.
You're right about the global scenario. Of course, we're still recovering from the pandemic years. But ahead of this year, given how we've handled those concerns over the last year or so, what were the top industry concerns communicated to the government from yourselves?
No, I think we were actually expecting that the government will be able to manage this geopolitical scenario in three different ways, right? One is obviously managing the inflation, which I think between RBI and the Finance Ministry, they have been able to handle very well. Second was making sure that India remains insulated from the global crisis, so to say.
As much as possible.
As much as possible. You can never be completely insulated.
Yes.
Third, which I think was I would call it very deft handling of making sure that the fiscal deficit was maintained without really losing the focus on growth. So the focus
yes. No, go ahead.
The focus on growth and focus on inflation without affecting the fiscal deficit, I think, has been one of the best methods of handling this situation.
So you mentioned how India is in an ideal situation given what is happening, but there has been a lot of criticism of, a few things as far as the Indian economy is concerned. Why do you say that we are in an ideal situation? I know that the global markers are very much in India's favor, and international agencies have of course appreciated India's efforts, plus the outlook is very positive. But ideal according to you, how so?
So I think it's very difficult to have I would call it a marker of an ideal, right? Because it's a moving goal. And expectations always keep changing. Once you have something, then you expect something more. But if you look at what has happened with the rest of the world, like I said, on these three factors of growth, inflation and managing, so to say, the fiscal deficit, every country has had the issues post coming out of COVID. India managed the COVID situation brilliantly. In fact, to our surprise, or to, I would say, the initial ask which we had, I think the government did not focus on consumer spending but made sure it spent on infrastructure. So if you look at why I believe this India is an ideal situation, is this focus on infrastructure has meant a big change in terms of both the factors, ease of doing business and cost of doing business. The logistics cost coming down supports manufacturing. So there is a domestic market. India is becoming more competitive, and when I mean more competitive, not just from business itself, but also from the digital public infrastructure which has been created. That for me is a very big differentiator from the rest of the world. That is the reason why I believe it's a very unique positioning today, or a unique opportunity today. On the geopolitical side, you have the rest of the world looking at India as a strategic trusted partner. You have Indian economy growing at a very good rate. And compared to the rest of the world, let us say, even the forecast for this year is 3.1% rest of the world. And here we are by IMF, and here we are speaking about, at least CII's view is it will be in excess of 7% in 25.
Right.
So if I keep all of these factors in mind, I think good domestic market, geopolitically trusted partner, a focus on cost and ease of doing business, I think you can't get any better than this.
You also talked about continuation, and you're absolutely right. Of course, the government has already showed a lot of confidence that they're going to present a full budget post the election. So that's of course on the political side. But I do want to ask you, if this government was to show its intent on those markers, plus markers, particularly the infrastructure spending and the control on the deficit, two of its highlight issues, do you expect that in this interim budget there will be that intent shown on both of these markers?
Yes, I believe so. I think this government has completely walked the talk in the past as well. So I think there would be obviously necessary support required for various other actions, which I'm sure there will be a direction about. I think the finance minister mentioned about, one of the other focus, or rather let me step back for a minute. One of the reasons why we have had very good growth is that there has been a focus on, I would call it the lesser growing sections of the business and the population. So that equitable growth requirement is something which obviously is important also from the economic side as well. Therefore, we do expect that both of these factors will be maintained. Directions should be given for continuing the equitable growth story.
Okay.
And last but not the least, make sure that the direction is set for the future.
If I was to talk about any one highlight that you are looking forward to, I'm not sure if I can use the word big bang given that it is an interim budget, but the big highlight that you are looking forward to, what would that be?
I think it's very difficult to say one, but I will put it in a different way of saying continuity with clear directions being given on how the future is going to be. So rather than be specific big bang, I will say it is these two messages which will come across the budget is what we are expecting, and that will be the real, I would call it, joy for everyone.
All right. Mr. Adinesh, thanks a lot for talking to us, and of course we look forward to interacting with you post-budget as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
You.
On that note, we're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. We're inching closer to the Finance Minister's speech, and of course our coverage will continue with experts in just a bit.
Dadu.
In field, more so in the field of artificial intelligence, you see more women entrepreneurs. So actually encouraging these people for more entrepreneurship and more startups and more venture capitalists will help everyone to be independent instead of merely depending on jobs. Of course, providing jobs is base that cannot be ignored, And for this, government should attract more big industrialist investments and foreign investments and all, and improve employment opportunities. Then one more important thing is in the field of agriculture, instead of the usual subsidy fertilizers which they should continue, but modernization in the equipment farming and now.
I'm Bhagavati Kirtana. I'm a college student and I'll be graduating my college within 2 months. So as a student, what I expect from this budget 2024 is that several initiatives should be taken, or I expect it should be taken in enhancement of skills sector. Like students should be provided with several policies where the skills can be enhanced, and also employment opportunities should be boosted so much, because that's what the next is. And even for higher studies, for PG things, the entrance exam, the coachings, it should be enhanced so much. And more than education, skills should be focused more. Then as a person, as a citizen of the country, I feel like with the inflation thing, the inflation, as the price of the basic necessities has increased so much, and that should be controlled, and that is one of my expectation in that. And also considering the agriculture sector, the subsidies should be increased for the fertilizers. And regarding the food sector also, the distribution system and the food storage system should be increased. I mean, it should be enhanced, or it should be maintained properly. That's what the thing is. And yeah, as a citizen, what we expect is that the price should be reduced. Yeah.
My name is Seshagiri Raj. My expectation on the upcoming union budget is the government should reduce the tax burden on the new tax regime. I had to opt for the new tax regime of no choice. Like now, after choosing, like I came to know that there's been excess tax that has been detected on the new tax regime.
I'm Padmanabhan, retired manager from Indian Bank and also a social activist. And regarding the budget which is being presented tomorrow, though it is an interim budget, some expect some announcement, some say only after election announcement will come. Anyway, whatever be the situation, what we expect from the budget, I will tell you. And instead of usual conventional way, the more important point in a different way I would like to present today is, that is, India's power in its youth. So youth empowerment is very important at this stage for a future strong India economically as well as socially. So to encourage this, more women as well as men entrepreneurs, particularly more women entrepreneurs, have to be inducted for startups, because now there are many venture capitalists who are willing to come into the that is play when these people who are capable, they don't have finance and all. So, and government, if they give more shops to this line, there will be more new startups and more new intelligence, particularly in technical field, more so in the field of artificial intelligence. You see more women entrepreneurs. So actually encouraging these people for more entrepreneurship and more startups and more venture capitalists will help everyone to be independent instead of merely depending on jobs. Of course, providing jobs is base that cannot be ignored, and for this government should attract more big industrialist investments and foreign investments and all, and improve employment opportunities. Then one more important thing is in the field of agriculture, instead of the usual subsidy fertilizers which they should continue, but modernization in the equipment farming and novel methods of farming are more important, for which the government should take some brave steps to provide more funds to the agriculturists who want to introduce modern formation, and also setting up of more institutes for training them to novel methods of agriculture and farming, which will increase the productivity. So this is also equally important. So you.
Welcome back to Budget Before Ballot. In an hour and 15 minutes, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the final budget before elections in April and May. Will it be a populist, welfarist one, or will she stick to the path of fiscal prudence? What are the expectations? We looked at 5 sectors before the break. Let's look at the other 5. In the housing sector, the expectation is that there will be a hike in 24B. This again is a very middle class expectation. The 2 lakh sort of savings on interest component, can that be increased to maybe 2.5 lakhs? Also, as far as exports are concerned, we had a record year in 22-23, 400 billion plus, but that's come down quite a shade in the year gone by. Will there be expectation of reducing tariffs to foster more competitiveness for Indian exports? In the automobile sector, this is that we were talking about regulatory compliances. You ask any auto expert, 114 inches, 117 inches, 120 inches, different tax rates for different sizes of cars. And then, of course, in the MSME sector, remember, this has again been an area of a bit of concern. The large corporations seem to be doing well in Modi Sarkar, but what about the MSMEs? Greater availability of institutional credit, that is an expectation for startups who've had a brilliant run for the last 10 years. Yes, in the last 1 year, there's been a bit of a funding winter, but today India is looking at over 100 unicorns. The expectation is there will be more tax incentives and ease of doing business. Here in our studios, Nirmala Sitharaman, founder and partner, Policy Consensus Center. We're also joined by Renu Gauri, who's a finance expert. But before I come to the experts, quick word from Arunima, who's joining us from outside the Rashtrapati Bhavan, where the finance minister and her team are expected in the next few minutes. Arunima.
Yes, the finance minister, after the photo opportunity at North Block at the finance ministry, moved to apprise the Rashtrapati about the interim budget, about the vote on accounts. The route that we are looking at towards Rashtrapati Bhavan has been sanitized, which means she could be leaving from Rashtrapati Bhavan any moment for the Parliament of India. There, the Prime Minister has already reached along with all the senior cabinet ministers, and Payal Mehta is reporting that the Prime Minister is chairing a meeting there. Ordinarily, the only agenda on the budget day for a cabinet meeting is to approve the budget, but the finance minister is still, we are still waiting for her to reach there. So it is possible that the Prime Minister is discussing some other important issues with the cabinet colleagues. Once she reaches Parliament, the cabinet will give its stamp of approval, and then around 11 a.m. we expect her to make that budget speech. But one thing that her sartorial choices has led to, she was wearing a blue sari and it was a very cold, rainy morning, Zaka. The sun has only just started shining here at the Raisina Hills. The fact that her entire team was in blue led to a lot of speculation and laughter when she came out for the photo op, asking if her sartorial choices were indicating a focus on the blue economy, which meant that any kind of special announcement for our marine resources. What is very clear, however, is the finance minister is going to keep the focus firmly on women voters, on the women electorate, the Nari Shakti.
All right, the color of the day seems to be blue. We've got a lot of blue in here in our studios as well. But at least it's a clear morning. It might be chilly, yes, but it's not a foggy one. All right, let me ask Nirmala Sitharaman, what are your expectations from a policy point of view? Of course, the government does have fiscal buoyancy, tax buoyancy, so it can do some welfareist populist measures, and you would expect any government faced with an election 2 months down the line to be a bit populist. But do you expect the finance minister to stick to her fiscal glide path to ensure that India remains on the path of fiscal prudence? There's also, external headwinds. There are wars that the world is facing. We don't know where oil prices are going to be this time next year. So walk us through, what is it that the finance minister, what is the terrain before her?
Thanks. I think in my opinion, this particular budget or vote on account, if you actually look at it, would be pretty basic.
Okay.
Because I think there are also considerations where you can't really announce very big bang reforms, etc., because of impending elections. But if you look at the next 5 years, or if an objective in terms of what they want to do, in terms of how it's going to work, I think there are certain things that they need to keep in mind. In my opinion, I think the government, if they come back to power, will probably reintroduce farm laws in an amended manner. I think that's impending. I think that will happen. I think the entire agenda as far as sustainability will continue.
Yeah.
So I think that will be a big thing. And I think the third would be in terms of just making sure that the fundamentals are still there. So in terms of fiscal prudence, in terms of inflation, in terms of all of that, they continue that way. And I think that's where they would head.
I think she made an interesting point about bringing back some of these fundamental reforms, agricultural reforms. Yes, politically, the government did not face success last time around. But let me get a quick word in from Renu Gauri as well before I come back to the studio experts on what these fundamental reforms look like. But Renu Gauri, from a tax point of view, and we've mentioned this earlier on in the program as well, 8 crore plus people have filed their returns. This whole shift from old regime to new regime, do you see the government giving further impetus to that? One of the areas I believe this is being talked about, it's speculated right now, is on HRA, to try and make some kind of allowance for HRA in the new regime.
Well, yes, you're right. Thank you, first of all, for having me on this panel, and very good morning to all of your viewers. Well, as you said, we are looking at, tax relief for a number of people. So when I say tax relief, people from all horizons are looking at the government with a lot of anticipation. So the senior citizens probably want their annuity to be left out of the tax ambit. The NRIs are looking at the ability to use their overseas accounts for refunds and payment of taxes. They want OTPs to be allowed on their foreign mobile numbers so that they can go ahead and make these tax transactions, etc. So having said that, you asked me about the HRA part. Well, yes, people, especially the techies, who are working in specific areas like say Bangalore, they are wanting to have HRA to be capped to be taken to about 50% of their basic salary. Because primarily at the moment only the metropolitans have factored in 50% of HRA. So that is precisely where we are looking at. And then of course the tax relief for other sections of the society, for women, maybe we would like to have more cash disposal.
All right, ma'am. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we're getting live pictures of the finance minister and her convoy reaching the Parliament House, the new Parliament building. I think one of our reporters was making this point. It's going to be the first budget speech from the new Parliament building. So in that way, it's significant as well. Gaurav?
It's going to be the first one in the new Parliament. That's quite significant. Also, just a small point, a bit of a trivia. This is size of India's union budget is for the first time going to cross 50 lakh crore. If you look back now, and if you look at the journey of how it has grown, just to give an idea, in 2010, when Pranab Mukherjee presented his second budget of the UPA 2 regime, size of India's budget crossed 10 lakh crore. In 14 years, it has grown more than five times. That kind of mirrors the heavy lifting that the government is doing so far as expenditure is concerned, both for consumption as well as welfare.
But is that in keeping with the expansion in the size of the economy?
That is right, absolutely right. And also a large part of that, the benefits of that may not have flowed in immediately. Say for instance, capital expenditure. These are intergenerational benefits. Sure. Also for welfare, the benefits are intergenerational. So to that extent, I think the size of the Indian budget crossing 50 lakh crore is a milestone that we need to keep in mind. Also, one question that I wanted to ask Gautam is also on, there's a lot of, this is an election budget that all of us are talking about. It's a pre-election budget, whether the government is going to announce populist measures or not, that's a matter of detail and conjecture. But assuming, just as an academic question, assuming that this party comes back to power with 400 plus seats, how is it going to do things differently that it has not been able to do? Is
that an assumption or is that a...
No, it's just an academic question.
It's an academic question.
Could be some wishful thinking here.
But it's interesting that you put a scale on it. Does a scale matter? 400 plus is the 400 part.
Yeah, so if it comes back to power with 400 seats, how is it going to do things differently? I mean, what is it that it has not been able to do with 300 plus seats that it will be able to do in 400 plus seats?
Okay, the first thing I think it will do, Gaurav, is that policy continuity. I think the broad vision of the government in terms of Amrit Kal as a climax in 2047 is clear. I'm talking about only economic policy. Yeah. I'm not talking about non-economic. So that is fairly clear, and the past has served the government well. It has served India well. We are the fastest growing economy among the most difficult global economic headwinds. So there will be policy continuity. Policy continuity is equal to private sector getting confidence that what you see is what you will most likely get. To say that it's exactly what you will get is no government has that kind of freedom. So I would see a lot of private sector investment come into, say, manufacturing, which seems to be the focus, or high-end semiconductors or telecom-related issues. She mentioned farm laws. It's a deep wishful thinking for me that they will come back.
I hope so.
He will try, the government will try and persuade farmers, but in my opinion, which I am yearning to be wrong, I am aching to be proven wrong, is that for 25 years we have to wait till Amrit Kal for the next round of agricultural reforms, because what the government has burnt and what the country has seen and what we have suffered because of this beautiful 3 lovely reforms that came and had to be taken back, which I think is Mr. Modi's worst economic policy decision, will not be forgotten so easily. So I would say one generation is lost.
Okay, just give me a moment, because we have to take a break. I think it's a great thought that Gautam has just brought up. As the Finance Minister now comes into the Parliament building, this is the new Parliament building. Again, traditionally, Gaurav, you know this, they used to stand on the steps of outside gate number 4, I think it was in the old Parliament building. And then again, there used to be this traditional photo op. Now this is the steps of the new Parliament building. So she's flanked on either side.
So the photo op this time is more structured. I think all photographers are at a distance, unlike in the old Parliament building where you know,
they've huddled together this time, I think.
No, I think it's the
keeping them at a distance is metaphorical for
they've also thought it through, right? They've created the space.
No, I didn't quite mean it like that. I'm sure that might be in the back of someone's mind, but because we've had a bit of a problem with Parliament just recently, an intrusion, unfortunately, that has led to slightly more invigorated security measures.
So now the Finance Minister and her team will go into the Parliament building. Of course, there will be the cabinet meeting where the budget will be ratified, and then she goes to Rashtrapati Bhavan and presents the first copy to the Rashtrapati. We'll take a quick break. This is going to be our final break as we then count down to the budget speech at 11 a.m. Quick break. We'll see you in 2 minutes with our studio experts. This is Budget Before Ballot. See you back in 2 minutes.
आप तो जानते ही हैं कि जब चुनाव का समय निकट होता है तब आम तौर पर पूर्ण बजट नहीं रखा जाता है। हम भी उसी परंपरा का निर्वाह करते हुए पूर्ण बजट नई सरकार बनने के बाद आपके समक्ष लेकर के आएंगे।
Thanks a lot for staying with our budget coverage here on CNN News 18. I'm joining you from the CII gathering in the national capital. You're joining the broadcast with me, Shivani Gupta, and I'm joined with none other than Mr. R. Dinesh, President CII and Chairman TVS Supply Chain Solutions Limited. Thanks a lot, Mr. Dinesh, for your time. Is there a lot of anticipation ahead of this budget, or is there an understanding this is a vote on account and therefore there are going to be mild expectations?
Thank you, Shivani. I think if you look at it, there is an expectation that there will be continuity.
Yes.
And that this will set the direction for the budget later, right? So for us, I think considering all the geopolitical issues which have been there, the biggest concerns was what is happening globally. So if I look at it in that context, I think India obviously is in a very, I would say the most ideal situation. So continuity and making sure that there is a clear direction being set for the future is how we look at this interim budget.
You're right about the global scenario. Of course, we're still recovering from the pandemic years. But ahead of this year, given how we've handled those concerns over the last year or so, what were the top industry concerns communicated to the government from yourselves?
No, I think we were actually expecting that the government will be able to manage this geopolitical scenario in three different ways, right? One is obviously managing the inflation, which I think between RBI and the Finance Ministry they have been able to handle very well. Second was making sure that India remains insulated from the global crisis, so to say.
As much as possible.
As much as possible. You can never be completely insulated.
Yes.
Third, which I think was I would call it very deft handling of making sure that the fiscal deficit was maintained without really losing the focus on growth. So the focus
yes. No, go ahead.
The focus on growth and focus on inflation without affecting the fiscal deficit, I think, has been one of the best methods of handling this situation.
So you mentioned how India is in an ideal situation given what is happening, but there has been a lot of criticism of a few things as far as the Indian economy is concerned. Why do you say that we are in an ideal situation? I know that the global markers are very much in India's favor, and international agencies have of course appreciated India's efforts, plus the outlook is very positive. But ideal according to you, how so?
So I think it's very difficult to have I would call it a marker of an ideal, right? Because it's a moving goal. And expectations always keep changing. Once you have something, then you expect something more. But if you look at what has happened with the rest of the world, like I said, on these three factors of growth, inflation and managing, so to say, the fiscal deficit, every country has had the issues post coming out of COVID. India managed the COVID situation brilliantly. In fact, to our surprise, or to, I would say, the initial ask which we had, I think the government did not focus on consumer spending but made sure it spent on infrastructure. So if you look at why I believe this India is an ideal situation, is this focus on infrastructure.
Welcome back. Our continuing coverage of budget before ballot. In about an hour's time, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will rise in the Lok Sabha to present what will effectively be the final budget of Modi Sarkar 2.0. Just moments ago, you had pictures of her and her team, flanked by both the Ministers of State for Finance, arriving in the new Parliament building. This is going to be the first budget speech in the new Parliament building in the last 75 years, the first time that a finance minister will be rising up in the new Lok Sabha to present the union budget. It is an interim budget. It is a vote on account. So yes, there is limited political and fiscal elbow room for any big bang announcements that one would expect will happen in July, whether this government comes back to power or whether there is a new government in power. Right now, it's going to be more about a vote on account. What is it that the Modi government has done in the last 10 years? Where has it taken India from in 2013-14 to where we are today in 23-24, and what it intends to do over the next 5 years if this government were to get a mandate. I'm still in conversation with our guests here in the studio, as well as, of course, Gurcharan Das and Renu Gauri, who are joining us via satellite. Before the break, we had this interesting conversation, and, Gautam, I'm sorry I interrupted you. But the things that could have been, or the things that haven't been, will also need to be, after all, it is a vote on account. So it is an account of what the Modi government has achieved and has not been able to achieve in the last 10 years. And you talked about farm laws. I can think about labor reform, right? They haven't bitten that bullet yet.
Land reform.
Land reform.
Which they took back.
Which they took back.
Both things they've taken back.
Do you see that changing, given the nature of the mandate, whatever it might be?
I don't see any change coming in farm laws other than persuasion. And maybe that will be a trickle up, in the sense you do it in the states first, maybe the BJP governed states first, and then it will trickle up rather than trickle down. That's the best I would say, and perhaps they may not even touch that. Land reforms is another contentious area. The moment you talk about land reforms, it becomes a hugely political issue. I don't know how they will move forward. It needs to be done. Perhaps the public sector land, perhaps railway land, perhaps army land can be opened out for private sector manufacturing, which is a necessity. Labor reforms, I'm slightly more optimistic, because already 43 labor laws have been compressed into 4 labor codes. So, but that is just a legislative re-articulation, rather legislative collation rather than a re-articulation. Yeah. For instance, the Factories Act, 70% of all the imprisonment clauses that I was talking about earlier reside in the Factories Act, Minimum Wages Act. there are these some of them are very ridiculous. Perhaps those reforms will happen through Jan Vishwas 2, Jan Vishwas 3, Jan Vishwas 4. So maybe labor reforms will be reformed from the outside rather than by calling them or terming them some mega labor reforms. And the last thing which I hope, but I don't know how this will go, is government should stop getting bullied by state power, by street power. I think if there is a policy, it needs to be debated, and it needs to come down hard on any law and order breach, and I mean any law and order breach, be it farm laws, be it CAA, be it anything.
Do you see these big ticket reforms
I
coming
have
through
a
in the
slightly
third term?
different view. I think that the BJP wants to position itself as the default party of governance until it doesn't actually win majorities in predominant number of states. Look, fundamentally,
they're already in power in like 17 states.
Fundamentally, Zaka, the South is not with the BJP right now.
Sure.
Some of the most significant states on the eastern coast are not with the BJP right now. What it can do with numeric strength, it is already in a position to do. It has a majority in the Lok Sabha. Through various ministrations, it manages the majority in the Rajya Sabha. I think it comes down to intent, and intent can only come when you realize that you have been able to touch and win the confidence of a bulk of voters. We are talking about very significant shifts, which will, through these labor laws, if they were, through land laws, these are laws that touch the daily existence of people. Of people.
Of your voters.
Not just that. See, remember that every single thing that Gautam talked about are actually state subjects. Whether it's farm, whether it's land, whether it's labor, they're all concurrent. No, most of them are, but in the sense that at the end of the day, the states still have to implement. It's a labor code. So the state still has to enact it. So the state has a large...
Just give me a moment. I'll come back to the guests here. Just give me 1 second. Ashish Bhutani, CEO of Bhutani Group, is now joining us. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhutani. You know, our guests in the studio were talking about land reform, labor reform. One area where there's been some degree of reform with RERA and others coming in is in real estate. What is the barometer in real estate right now? Because people are saying, you know, we're seeing, you know, pockets of growth in the big cities, but beyond that, we're not seeing. There's also the view that for the large parts of middle class, it's become unaffordable. And yet at the same time, for the poorer sections, and this is one area where you have to give credit to the Modi government, for the poorer sections, PM Awas has built record number of homes. So how would you stack where real estate is at the moment here in India?
See, very honestly, I'd like to draw a very quick comparison. China last year, 30% of entire country's GDP came from real estate. That accounts 30%. I think it is the strongest sector in the world right now. It's more than 1.5 times of the Indian economy. As you correctly said, the PM Awas has shown staggering numbers and it will continue to do the same. But very honestly, our expectation right now from the budget is one single window clearance, and the second most requirement that comes now is PPP projects. I think what China successfully did was implement a number of PPP like mega projects. For example, the film city that just recently came in, and with God's grace, we won it as well. So similar such projects need to come in for entire India, and that will really propel the growth for the entire country.
But isn't there a fear, since you used the China example, the other big story that's come from there is one of their biggest real estate developers, Evergrande, has filed for insolvency. So there is also, and especially with real estate, there is this fear of when will the bubble burst?
See, very honestly, I know they were the second largest developers in China, and there are bad apples everywhere. But they had a debt of more than $300 billion. That's more than the entire debt of Sweden, to be very honest, comparative in the real estate sector. So that sort of exposure for a single developer had staggering impact on the entire economy. There needs to be, yes, government interference on the amount of debt a developer via obviously debt to equity ratio that needs to be maintained for any developer that the government should monitor. I 100% agree on that. But given the fact the amount of turnover they did, in 2018, if you talk about Evergrande, their turnover was more than the top 50 developers in India in the same year.
Okay.
Combined.
All right. One final word. There used to be a time not so long ago where people were talking about, real estate is the den of all black money. You want to make your black money into white, that's where you go. But with RERA and others coming in, do you see that changing? Do you see a more structure and corporatization of real estate coming through, and therefore it's now much more of the genuine buyers who are coming into this rather than the speculators?
See, one thing I'll like to quickly draw upon. I was in fact recently talking to a very, very seasoned professional. In UP, if you get a RERA number now successfully, trust me, it's even earlier. I'll draw a very quick comparison. People used to say if there is a loan available on the property, then you know that the property is clean. Now, I think with UP RERA especially, if you get a RERA in UP, your property is cleaner than even a bank's go ahead. That's how difficult it is to get a RERA now. Yes, you are right to an extent. The speculators have gone, but investors to a certain degree will always be involved in real estate, especially in the commercial real estate segment, which in fact I think is very necessary as well. That supports both the developers and the country.
All right, Mr. Bhutani, thank you very much for joining us. Is real estate a marker of where an economy stands? And if it is, then where does the Indian economy stand? Like Mr. Bhutani said, 30% of China's economy comes from their cities. They have, 150, 200 cities which have more than 1 million people?
Definitely, real estate is a marker of, which way the economy is going. Also, how much people are earning. When you buy a house, and it's an asset. So when
it's also a sign of confidence, right?
That's right. So when you buy a house, it is the key determinant of that decision is not your current income. It's your what you think about your ability to fund this asset over a 15-year period. So what do you think about your future income, and that works at the psychological level too.
Value can only be unlocked when there is demand for it, when there are enough people who have the disposable incomes to buy.
So there are enough people. In 2015, real estate was 5% of GDP. Today, it's 8.7%. And that's a huge number on a rising GDP. So I think that confidence that you're talking about in real estate is there, definitely. In fact, real estate is one of the closest investing asset classes of Indians because firstly, you get to live there. And secondly, they think there is some form of stability and long-term
return. On the other
return.
hand, my point is if you look around, there is a huge demand-supply mismatch.
Exactly.
You look around you, anecdotally, you look at your greater Noidas, you look at certain other places, you have huge supply, there's no demand. So the question also behooves as to why there is that demand supply.
Consumption, demand, private consumption contributes 61% to GDP. That's where we have our biggest problem in
so
the economy.
Even with your real estate, with your interest rates being what they are, they're not particularly cheap, but they're reasonable. So with what it is, why is it that people are not buying? What is happening there? And also forget the real estate sector in terms of what houses are being built, but look at profitability of real estate companies. They're still struggling, right, in terms of what has happened with post-COVID, with all of that, with sales stalled. It's still problematic. They will come out. RERA's played a very important role.
No, but when you talk about, infrastructure spending, and we've talked about this in great detail, 10 lakh crores building highways and ports and bridges, real estate, private real estate is also have to sort of keep up pace with that. It can't just be the government is going on steroids and the private guys are still, with their walking sticks.
No, but there is also, sorry, just one second. But there is a problem in terms of when the government spends on infrastructure, it's one thing. But when you have real estate, there is a lot of private sector, there is access to credit that they need, which is not very forthcoming, given the state that they are in. Sorry, please go ahead.
See, real estate is a very good example. The fact is, if you take the China comparison, we've seen that 28% was the 8% comparison that you just gave, Gautam. The fact is, the Chinese economy, they moved from one level to another. While they became the back end of the world, manufacturing back end of the world, they fundamentally grew because of the strength of its own internal economy as well, of the demand and supply as well. So what we have to do when we're talking about labor, for example, labor codes may be too much to fix in an interim budget, but fundamentally, if you're looking at the Teslas of the world coming to India, you're looking at, we are now 8%, 9%, 10% of the smartphone manufacturing globally, right? Of Apple, for example. On electronics is India now among the top 5 exports. Now, if you want to really scale up that manufacturing, to take the steps that along the line that China took 15, 20 years ago, and to be competitive, you have to change labor laws. And I think there is significant amount of thinking in the government to go towards that route, especially for women working and so on. How you do it is the question. Can you do it in an interim budget? There's also a concurrent list issue. So those are kind of
the only way you can do that effectively without disruption, social disruption, is by growing other parts of the economy. Land, for example, is a very touchy subject because so many people are connected to land.
All right, Rahul, just give me 1 second. I think we're getting shots of the Prime Minister inside Parliament. Yeah, we can go full frame with that. He's just arrived there. He will, of course, chair the cabinet meeting. The cabinet will then give its stamp of approval to the budget, after which the finance minister and her team will head out to Rashtrapati Bhavan to give a copy of the budget to the president. But you can just see the Prime Minister arriving there in the new Parliament building. Like Gaurav and others have been pointing out, or reporters have been pointing out, it will be the first budget speech in the new Parliament building. So whether or not there will be something to underline that fact, some announcement by which this budget can be identified and marked with, because it's the first budget in the new Parliament building, we don't know. But rest assured, I think the Modi government has this eye for history and its place in history.
We just heard Nilesh Shah some time back, and I think he gave us a bit of a hint. He said that, look, fiscal consolidation is what has distinguished us from certain other economies. We also have a glide path. I don't see the Modi government going for a very big bang populist. I mean, I don't like to use the word populist because it has negative connotations. There's nothing wrong with being populist in politics, because you are actually serving the interests of the public, the people, the populace. So let's not add a pejorative to it, but I just feel that profligacy may not come through in this particular budget. It never has with the Modi government. I think that's one of the reasons why we are, we have rather confidence in the government that it will move very firmly in the direction of fiscal consolidation. I think that will remain its leitmotif. I think that's
just
one
give me one
fundamental
second.
thing.
We've got our colleague Payal, who's joining us from the new Parliament building. So our colleagues were pointing this out. It will be the first budget speech of the Finance Minister in the new Parliament building. We're getting pictures, Payal, of the Prime Minister arriving for that cabinet meeting where the approval will be given to the budget, and then, of course, the Finance Minister will present that at 11 o'clock. Just walk us through what is happening there right now.
Well, in fact, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, Zaka, has just walked into the cabinet meeting about 5 minutes ago, but the Prime Minister and the other ministers have been there for the last 40 minutes. The cabinet has been underway. We are given to understand that there could be about 7 to 8 other agendas apart from this approval of the budget. And Nirmala Sitharaman walked in to the cabinet meeting smiling, when we asked her, when he asked her what we can expect from her in this budget, all she gave us was a smile as well. So obviously, that is something which one has to look forward to as to how this budget is going to really turn out to be. The cabinet meeting is currently still on as we speak, and in a bit from now, the cabinet ministers will leave from the cabinet meeting. And in fact, Zaka, just as we speak, the cabinet meeting has just ended. And beg your pardon, the cabinet meeting has just about ended, and we'll have to just get some updates because you can see a lot of leaders leaving from the cabinet. So that means that the budget has been approved. We'll have to just get an official confirmation in a couple of seconds. But yes, we do see other people being invited into the cabinet. In fact, Ministers for Law and Justice Arjuna Meghwal and Pankaj Chaudhary and Bhagwat Karat are all walking into the meeting just as we speak because obviously there could be some other agenda to pursue. But yes, for now, the cabinet has met to approve the budget in particular.
All right, Payal, we'll leave it at that. If we go back to the previous graphic, and I love the way our team says the Aam Aadmi's expectations, so it doesn't apply to any of you guys. But, I mean, we were talking about real estate and how to spur real estate, and we've been talking about this for the last 10 years.
Actually, we're quite modest. We have no...
You're not an Aam Aadmi, please. Don't try to convince yourself or any of us.
I feel like it, but I'm sorry, I feel like it when we look at the when we look at our
bank statements. But listen, I mean, about spurring real estate, right? Got to weigh in on this. The tax exemption that you get on the interest component has been 2 lakhs, I think, for the last 5 years, maybe even more than that.
That's right.
What stops government from incentivizing that? And in the new regime, there isn't even that exemption. So then what's the messaging?
No, it's a very good question. I'm glad you asked that question because this government has made it very clear ever since it came out with the new income tax regime that the new income tax regime is going to be the default option.
Yeah.
It wants to do away with a plethora of exemptions that has actually made the system inefficient. The Income Tax Act, if you look at the Income Tax Act 1961 and it's a maze. You cannot go through. That's why all of us need a CA to go through all of this.
Yeah.
The government has made it very clear that if it has signaled its intent that the new tax regime is going to be the default option so far as this government is concerned, and it wants more and more people to opt for the new option. The government has come out with an argument, and last year also it repeated that argument, saying that actually people end up saving more on taxes if it opts for the new option. And that is the reason why even Section 80C, for instance, which was first increased from 1 lakh to 150,000 in 2014, has remained unchanged for almost 10 years now. And if people have to save, they don't need incentives, tax incentive to save. They should save in financial asset classes like mutual funds, etc., where money grows and multiplies more strongly. And tax should be paid for the sake of tax, and savings should be made for the sake of savings, not for the sake of tax savings.
Okay, I'll take a break on that point. Savings for the sake of savings and tax for the sake of tax, and not the other way around. We'll take a quick break. It'll be our final break before, in another 40 minutes or so, the Finance Minister rises to present the interim budget for 24-25. She will give an outlook as to how the Modi government intends to take the India economy story forward. But more than that, I guess it will also be an account of what the Modi Sarkar has done in the last 10 years for the India story and for Indians therein. Quick break. We'll see you right on the other side in 2 minutes. This is Budget Before Ballot, the final budget speech before the general elections.
Co-presented by
a big change in terms of both the factors, ease of doing business and cost of doing business. The logistics cost coming down supports manufacturing. So there is a domestic market. India is becoming more competitive, and when I mean more competitive, not just from business itself, but also from the digital public infrastructure which is being created. That for me is a very big differentiator from the rest of the world. That is the reason why I believe it's a very unique positioning today, or a unique opportunity today. On the geopolitical side, you have the rest of the world looking at India as a strategic trusted partner. You have Indian economy growing at a very good rate. And compared to the rest of the world, let us say, even the forecast for this year is 3.1% rest of the world. And here we are by IMF, and here we are speaking about, at least CII's view is it will be in excess of 7% in 25.
Right.
So if I keep all of these factors in mind, I think good domestic market, a geopolitically trusted partner, a focus on cost and ease of doing business, I think you can't get any better than this.
You also talked about continuation, and you're absolutely right. Of course, the government has already showed a lot of confidence that they're going to present a full budget post the election. So that's of course on the political side. But I do want to ask you, if this government was to show its intent on those markers, plus markers, particularly the infrastructure spending and the control on the deficit, two of its highlight issues, do you expect that in this interim budget there will be that intent shown on both of these markers?
Yes, I believe so. I think this government has completely walked the talk in the past as well. So I think there would be obviously necessary support required for various other actions, which I'm sure there will be a direction about. I think the Finance Minister mentioned about, one of the other focus, or rather let me step back for a minute. One of the reasons why we have had very good growth is that there has been a focus on, I would call it the lesser growing sections of the business and the population. So that equitable growth requirement is something which obviously is important also from the economic side as well. Therefore, we do expect that both of these factors will be maintained. Direction should be given for continuing the equitable growth story.
Okay.
And last but not the least, make sure that the direction is set for the future.
If I was to talk about any one highlight that you are looking forward to, I'm not sure if I can use the word big bang given that it is an interim budget, but the big highlight that you are looking forward to, what would that be?
I think it's very difficult to say one, but I will put it in a different way of saying continuity with clear directions being given on how the future is going to be. So rather than be specific big bang, I will say it is these two messages which will come across the budget is what we are expecting, and that will be the real, I would call it, joy for everyone.
All right. Mr. Adinesh, thanks a lot for talking to us, and of course we look forward to interacting with you post-budget. as well.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
you.
On that note, we're slipping into a very short break, but don't go anywhere. We're inching closer to the Finance Minister's speech. And of course, our coverage will continue with experts in just a bit.
आप तो जानते ही हैं कि जब चुनाव का समय निकट होता है तब आमतौर
Welcome back to our special coverage here on CNN News 18, Budget Before Ballot. These are the latest pictures of the Finance Minister at Rashtrapati Bhavan, along with the President presenting a copy to the President also giving her, I presume, some kind of sweet before she stands up to present the budget. The entire team, the Finance Secretary, the Revenue Secretary, the Economic Affairs Secretary, and of course the two Ministers of State for Finance are also present there in this meeting. It's a brief affair, as it were, and then the Finance Minister returns to the Parliament, where the Cabinet gives its approval to the budget, and then at 11 o'clock, in about 35 minutes from now, she rises to present the budget. Our experts in the studio are here. You know, the contrast between that picture and you guys is that there are two women at the forefront of that picture, and in this studio, it's all men in black suits. Rahul Shivshankar leading the pack.
Rahul Shivshankar, unfortunately, is part of the downtrodden
blue suit. But yes, we did, of course, have a couple of women in our, and one dressed in blue.
You know, the female labor rate, participation rate needs to increase in the studio. That's where we need to start.
I like the way you're looking at Rahul.
I like the way,
because in the previous segment, he said bank statement and he pointed at me. So I'm just returning the favor.
That is hardly a favor. No, but fundamentally, I think, look, I have a feeling that there is going to be something. If we are talking about addressing political constituencies, there's definitely going to be something for women in this particular budget. The Prime Minister actually hinted at that yesterday when he came up in front of Parliament, said Ram Ram to everybody, and then talked about how they're going to be focused at uplift of the women sector. And remember, and I think he will be able to give you, Nalin will be able to give you the numbers about how much the women vote actually matters to the Bharatiya Janata Party.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The creation of a new women vote for the BJP has been at the center of the BJP's rise, along with the other things that around the cultural nationalism issues and so on under Narendra Modi. Fundamentally, women in India at the national level, in national party level, always voted much more for Congress than for the BJP historically.
And NARA data that you have plumbed basically and pioneered gives those numbers out in your book.
Thank you. They always voted more for the Congress, number one. Number two, women always voted much more than much less than men. 2019 was the first election in Indian history where the women turnout was slightly higher than the male turnout. And in state after state after state, in all the battleground states, in those states, women voters outvoted men for the BJP by a margin. So that is at the heart of Mr. Modi's political model. So if you look at the Republic Day parade, the entire this has been, this time it was noticed a lot. But if you go back the last 5 years of Republic Days, increasingly women participation visibly. It's a political statement. Women have always been in the armed forces or police for a long time, but to project them in this manner is very much part of a political language. And that's not just political imagery, if you like. You look at the amount. PM Awas is a simple example. 17 million houses built, 64% of them in the names of women. You look at Swachh Bharat, toilets. Millions of toilets built, and they are personal toilets which have a direct impact on gender at the village level. So that's very much been part of the Modi template, and I think we will see more of that.
And it's not just because of cultivating, constituencies per se. It also feeds into this emphasis on moving towards a casteless polity. And women, if you can target them, of course, you can overarchingly cover that with just 50% of the population by focusing on the primary identity, which is
I'll give you an
their,
example of this.
their
Rahul,
gender.
that's a great point you brought up. In the UP election last year, there was a lot of talk about the Jat vote, right?
Exactly.
Now, this idea of cross-cutting categories which cut across caste. At one level, the BJP, which used to be an upper caste rich party, has become much more broad-based. Like you said, in the Narad Index, we showed that it's got a much larger base among the non-Yadav OBCs and non-Yadav Dalits. But look at the Jat vote, for example, in UP last year. If you demographically and gender-wise, is the older Jats in the male category voted much against the BJP. The younger Jats and women fundamentally voted in favor of BJP, which is why they swept Western UP. So, and that shows you how the old templates have changed.
But let's bring it back to the budget
that the Prime Minister talked about also focus on primary identities, not so much on caste identities.
Let's bring it back to the four. I mean, you can call it the voter bloc, or you want to call it whatever you want. But women, youth, farmers, and what was the fourth?
Garib.
And Garib. You see specific announcements in the Finance Minister's budget for these four blocks of the populace?
Absolutely, yes. And either it will be new schemes. Likelihood of a new scheme being announced is lower because it's a vote on account or an interim budget.
Yeah.
But definitely more allocation and more emphasis on all these four segments. And just to digress a bit, you asked Gautam to describe Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman and her tenure, and he used the word courageous. I would just like to add that because she has been courageous also on one big front, which is trying to bring in transparency in India's public finance management, particularly in fiscal, in the definition of fiscal deficit. Because what she has done is she has brought into the into the definition of fiscal deficit, which were earlier components which were earlier considered to be off budget liabilities, but anyway were showing up as government borrowing, and these are essentially in food, fertilizer and fuel. And that is a massive change from, say, a previous era where the fiscal deficit numbers would come around, say, 3% or 4%, but if you look at the whole picture, it would be close to double digits, which is what Nirmala Sitharaman's tenureship as finance minister is actually.
But what is the government doing to move away from those subsidies on food, fuel and fertilizer? Like Rahul was saying, I think there's some data point that came on one of the pieces
I'll tell you.
A few days ago,
Yeah.
that the FFF subsidies are pretty much at the same levels that they were 10 years ago.
No. So, well, I mean, looking at the levels is one way of looking at it. But if you look at fuel, for instance, one of the most complex pieces of energy economics has been to dismantle fuel subsidies in the manner that this government has gone about in doing it. So diesel and petrol prices now are market determined. That was almost unthinkable, say about 12, 13 years ago, when every time crude prices used to go up, there used to be big meetings in the finance ministry, in the petroleum ministry, and the oil marketing companies would come and say that you give us subsidies, so they will cushion the subsidies and the oil prices.
But what explains then the reversal of the trend from Modi 1 to Modi 2? In Modi 1, the subsidies declined from 2.5% to 1.4% of GDP. This is all three, FFF, all the three as a block. But in Modi 2, the trend is reversed.
In Modi 2, the food subsidies have gone up significantly also because of the COVID payouts. And that stands out between 3 years, 2021, 21-22 and 2020, and that has continued for now.
They're now continuing it for another 5 years.
So that is going to continue. And if you have a case saying then we need to stop food subsidies during COVID period, I don't think I agree with that, because that is a merit subsidy. So we need to distinguish between what is merit and non-merit. And if the whole argument about freebies is about non-merit subsidies, reveries is about non-merit subsidies. It's not about merit subsidies. I think large part of the food subsidies qualify as merit subsidies.
No, and quite frankly, I don't think these subsidies will ever disappear. Very honestly, I mean, look at it from
till there is deprivation at the levels that there are in India,
exactly.
it won't disappear.
Not just because of the fact that it's a political thing, but even otherwise, as I think you said correctly,
I slightly disagree with you on this, because look, fundamentally, if I understand that there was a merit subsidy need at that particular point to provide food, but continuation of it for another 5 years, you are actually then telling people that, look, maybe the recovery hasn't been V-shaped for all sections.
Just give me one moment, because we're going from food subsidy this end of the pyramid to the other end of the pyramid. I'm going to go across to my colleague Shivani, who is at CII, and she has two leading India Inc. CEOs with her. So go ahead, Shivani.
Thanks a lot for that, Zaka. Barely any time before the Finance Minister's speech, so I'm going to keep it brief and I'm going to talk to Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General, CII, and also Mr. Kamal Bali joining us, President and MD, Volvo Group India, also CII Southern Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Limited time, so I'm going to touch upon the concern points. Mr. Banerjee, coming to you first, there's been a concern about private participation and private investment. When is that cycle going to kick in and what can the government do to boost that sentiment?
So, good question. Private sector, my first answer to your first part of the question is private sector has started kicking in. I'm seeing new investment, fresh investments coming into many sectors. And many sectors, cement, capital goods, pharmaceuticals, one can go on. There are quite a few where we are seeing already fresh investments taking place. Number two, if you see in the private sector, the capacity utilization for almost 75% of our companies are, our sectors are between 75 to 100%, which is a strong indicator that new investments are coming in. And the third and the last point is, what the government has done very well during COVID and post is the capex spending, which is strong. So we would like to see the capex of the government continuing at 20%, which will crowd in the private sector investment.
Mr. Bali, coming to you, how would you describe the sentiment as far as the industry is concerned? Ease of doing business, which has been a big talking point in India over the last 10 years. What do you expect mostly from the Finance Minister today?
So I think, first of all, the sentiment is very positive, and you all know that India is in spotlight for many reasons now, many good reasons. I mean, when we travel overseas, we find so much of traction to the India story. People really now, you don't have to sell the India story anymore. I mean, it is already there, and therefore, so that's one good news. And second, I will completely agree with CB that the focus of the budget needs to continue as in the past years on investing in the capex for infrastructure development, because that has a multiplier effect, not only for a long-term growth of the economy, also for the current. You create jobs, you feed into the core sectors of the economy like cement, steel, and it is also a reflection to your first question, basically that leads to a huge upside on demand, which then leads to a virtuous cycle of more investments coming in, private sector kicking in. So I would personally feel that we should continue on this particular journey.
Is there a concern on the MSME front that has been voiced for quite some time, also on job creation?
No, I think MSME is a very important part of the manufacturing, so there is no doubt about it. And our MSME sector has been fragile over many years, though they are improving in a good way, because the world is shifting at a very fast pace in terms of new technologies, in terms of disruptions in the whole business model. So we have, and at CII we are doing a lot of work in this direction, and I think this is a very important point you raised, and I think there should be some very specific initiative which the CII can run for the government in the interest of MSMEs, and that's one area that should be a focus area too.
So your thoughts on MSME plus job creation? There's been a lot of criticism about this being jobless growth.
So, MSME is a sector which will employ, which is an employment generating sector. Now, while the large companies, we have good results, we are seeing opportunities, but today, as was mentioned by Kamal, there is a need for MSMEs to graduate or rather digitally transform themselves. There are new technologies, new issues. So access to financing so that these the MSMEs could really focus on digital transformation, technology adoptions, etc. is required, and therefore support to the MSME sector is important. A lot was done earlier also for the MSME sector, but with the changing nature, when they need to be also linked to the large industry on the supply chain and the global world. So there is a need for buttressing that. And coming to the issue of jobs, as you said, MSMEs can create a large number of jobs, but jobs, MSMEs are also linked to a lot to the rural non-farm sector, the non-agricultural rural sector, so to say. So if we are able to encourage them into those areas, I think we will see a lot of jobs coming both in the rural India, which is important, and also in the MSME sector.
Speaking of rural India, demand has been muted. Do you think something particularly needs to be done about that?
So I would think that the budget the interim budget would focus and would need to focus a lot on the rural sector, farmers, very, very critical and important focus on irrigation technologies. Today what's happening is a lot of, tools could be used, especially technology again, AI, etc., weather forecast, seeds, research on agriculture. All of that is going to be very, very critical. And I think the rural sector, the rural demand and the rural sector, and through the direct tax intervention of income tax, there could be a lot.
You mentioned direct tax. I wasn't going to ask you about that, but what is your expectation? Because our viewers would be very keen to know minutes before the finance minister's speech.
So what, at every budget there is an expectation, and the expectation is that the budget is for all. And I think this time the budget should be also for all. And therefore, yes, of course, to spur demand, to spur, to really navigate through lots of challenges, money in the hands of people across all sections, especially the poorer sections, would be very, very critical and important.
This being an election year, this being a vote on count before an election, do you expect something populist to come in this budget, Mr. Bali?
I think the actions which the government has been taking, they will move, to my mind, in that direction, whether it is infrastructure, whether it is inclusive growth, they will continue to do that. I don't expect any major populist measure.
But income tax break could be greatly populist and something that has been awaited for a very long time.
I would think that the budget should be popular.
Yes.
It should be a popular budget. Popular budget need not necessarily be a populist budget.
That's well said, CV. Absolutely, I agree.
But sir, from your point of view, for example, from the Volvo Group's point of view, what have been some of the pressing points and something that you think could be addressed, should be addressed?
I think the key for all of us in the industry is how do we grow our manufacturing to occupy a much more stake in the GDP. So typically manufacturing has been is varying between 15 to 17%. We want this number to go up to 22 to 25%, because if you look at all large economies in the past, if you look at Germany, if you look at Korea, China, it's manufacturing which has anchored these economies for many decades. So India is going to be no different. In some ways we jumped from agriculture to services and we skipped that middle layer of manufacturing in the past. But I'm sure, I think a huge focus has been seen, especially in the last 4 to 5 years, with the PLI schemes, with many more investments coming into the country, with all sunrise sectors coming into India. So I see a new birth for manufacturing in India. I personally believe you will see a story which is going to be a very strong story, as strong as services in the manufacturing sector in the next 5 to 10 years.
No, this is something that has been talked about for quite some time. We cannot quite be the growth engine that we hope to be for ourselves and for the world without manufacturing playing a key role.
So the manufacturing sector expansion from 15-16% to 25% would be a critical factor both for India to be in the global value chain, global supply chain. It's going to be very critical. And manufacturing, going back to your earlier point, manufacturing, say today we need a lot of tweaking today to see how we take into fold the success and the importance of the small and the mid-sized companies in manufacturing. They would have to play a very vital role. It's just not the large companies. Then how do we get global companies to operate here and get ourselves linked so that we develop a supply chain and then create abilities for us to actually be able to manufacture what global companies in India would be able to would be doing. So today India is an attractive destination, as was mentioned by Kamal. So we will continue to get a lot of investment, but we also need that base for them to have local supply chain established. And I think therefore we need across the chain ancillaries and small scales to develop.
Final couple of questions before I toss back to our studio. Very quickly, overall, this is, of course, a budget which is just pre-election. 10 years of Narendra Modi Sarkar. Your highlights of what they've done well, and what is something you look forward to?
I think they've done very well on infrastructure. Not only have they spent a lot of money, anecdotally, when you travel around the country, you can see a lot of new infrastructure, either already ready or in the process. So I think full marks there to the government on infrastructure creation. So that's one very. The other one is very clearly the digital transformation which the country has seen. And today we have actually become the epicenter of digital transformation. If you look at the fintech transactions, the largest number of fintech transactions in the world take place in India today. So I think that's basically, so therefore that has also led to financial inclusion of the bottom of the pyramid. So I think that's the second big win, I would say, for this government in the last 10 years. And third, of course, is basically on the sustainability aspects, on committing to going on decarbonization, a lot of focus on renewable energy sources. So I think on sustainability, on digital transformation, and on infrastructure creation, to my mind, these are the three takeaways of this government. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Banerjee and Mr. Bali, and look forward to your views post-budget as well. With that, I'm tossing over to you back, Zaka, in the studio.
All right. So, a view from CII. One thing we haven't talked about is we have, another 15 minutes before the Finance Minister rises to present the budget. It's an interim budget, a vote on account, and of course, the main one will happen post-elections in July. But Gaurav is here, and, one barometer is how the Sensex reacts to the Finance Minister's speech. I believe she has the record for the highest intraday turnaround in the Sensex. I think it was a
21-22 budget. February 1st, 2021, 4.25% rise in the Sensex. But if you compare this to the last interim budget, 2019-20, Piyush Goyal's budget, Sensex closed 0.43% up. So it was broadly flat. 2021, that was the COVID budget, when the fiscal deficit was fixed at 9% of GDP. Markets clearly did not like it. Markets fell minus 2.5%, contracted 2.5%. 1920 final, her first budget in July, markets fell 1.19%. But broadly, it's been rather flat. Last year, we know it was an outlier year because despite being a great budget, a good budget, and during the course of the budget speech, the markets went up by more than 1,000 points, but eventually fell because of Hindenburg and Adani.
But tell me this whole business about short-term and long-term capital gains, that's a big market mover. Do you see any announcement in that regard?
I do not expect. The markets, I think, are not expecting a big change in the capital gains tax structure, although it's very convoluted at this point in time. The tax structure itself, for different asset classes, there are different rates and different tenures and different slabs, and also different rules for imposing capital gains. There is a clear case for consolidating this and standardizing this into one single, easy to administer, simple regime, but that hasn't come about, although we have been talking about it for the last 3-4 budgets at least. I would expect, I think, if anything of that nature has to come, because it will be significantly market moving and will also require a fair degree of consultation, will probably come in the final budget whenever it's presented.
Success has been on GST, and I think we're looking at 18 lakh crores for 2023.
Almost 20.
Yeah, almost 20 lakh crores. Again, when it came in, there was a lot of confusion. States were not entirely fully on board. I think the first year was pretty difficult, and then it's sort of kept up. And today, you can't think of an indirect tax regime without GST. What will it take to do the same for direct taxes? Because we've been talking about direct tax code for a number of years.
I think direct taxes, this has been one of the biggest points that they've been talking about but not implemented.
Exactly.
Direct tax reforms has been on the agenda for a very long time. And there's been a lot of discussion around it and all of that, but I don't think there's been any movement. They've made the instance of collection, etc., made it more online rather than, like the digital innovations around it. But at the end of the day, from a tax structure point of view, it's problematic. Take many instances of capital gains, what you're saying. So take capital gains. With capital gains as well, not only is it a problem across asset classes, if you start looking at crypto, the capital gains there is a completely different ball game because you can't offset, you can't do anything.
That's your marginal rate. That's what she said. In order to keep people away, you will be taxed at your marginal rate of tax.
No, capital gains.
Yeah,
I'm not talking
crypto gains.
capital gain. In capital gains, you can't offset. See, in most other capital gains, you are allowed to offset your capital gains with other losses. With crypto, no matter whether you make a profit or loss, you can't offset. There is an issue there fundamentally in terms of reconciliation. You can have your reasoning for doing what that is. It's not a question of whether you're right or wrong, but I'm just saying it's convoluted. And you need to have a simpler regime in terms of taxes per se, especially with direct taxes.
But wasn't that the idea behind the new tax regime? You have 3 flat rates or 5 flat rates, and then, like you said, you save for savings sake and not for tax savings purposes. But that hasn't come about.
I don't think that will ever happen also, quite frankly. Savings for savings purpose is great. It's like saying you get insurance not because you need to be insured and not for savings.
That's right.
It's this. I mean, it's an entire behavioral shift that needs to happen.
No, I think it's also got to do with incentives. So, I mean, I don't agree with the fact that you need to do insurance for the sake of insurance. You don't need to buy yearly products that is you don't need to save to buy an insurance. But savings is savings, insurance is insurance. These are two different things.
What is stopping us from going 10, 20, 30%? These are the
so what is stopping politics? Politics, signaling and symbolism. That's what it comes down to.
I think it's much more than that. I think there are a lot of tax incentives that are available in the previous tax regime that is forcing people to stay on with the previous tax regime. So if you have an ATC, Section ATC deduction of 150,000, if you have an interest rate, housing interest rate, and a plethora of other stuff, other deduction available in the previous income tax regime, you'd rather stay there then move on to
what is stopping? Let's say, and this is a government with a big majority, right?
I'll tell you this.
What is stopping a government from saying in ATC we will only have Provident Fund, right? Whatever other savings you want to do, it's in NPS. Go ahead and invest in NPS. If you want, let's say, saving money for a rainy day. Everything else we're abolishing in ATC.
I'll tell you the mind of Nirmala Sitharaman ji. In my book, when she was launching my book Reform Nation, I had critiqued her on exactly this point. That Chidambaram had left us with 3 elegant tax rates, and now we are at 11 effective tax rates. And this needs to be simplified. So she said, you go and ask the people and the accountants, people are actually happier with so many slabs than they were. So this is the mind of this is what is the public answer to these questions. But I completely and absolutely agree with you. We need very simple, not only in direct taxes, which is 10, 20, 30, but even in GST, we need to compress all this. Now, could it be a state of political economy? Could it be trying to look at various taxation through various constituents? I don't know. Another point on taxation. Every budget, it increases the
I think you've just given your answer.
It increases the tax level. Today at 7 lakh, you don't pay any taxes. Now, my question is, I think, aren't we prosperous enough today? Forget the extremely poor. Aren't we prosperous enough today that every person can give 1,000 rupee tax? It's a tax discipline. Why do you want to? I agree with the rich should pay more, etc., etc. But that the non-rich should not pay any taxes whatsoever is also not correct. I think this need to reshape the thinking around how we pay taxes. And on direct tax, she has simplified it.
As I'm saying, that all comes down to politics.
That's a state subject.
And signaling.
Farmers' taxation is a state subject. It's not a union subject.
No, but if you're deriving income out of agriculture, surely the government can ask for that.
There are so many subsidies also that are. Sorry, go ahead.
So constitutionally not allowed to impose any kind of income tax on farm income.
So states can, if they wish to.
No, income tax is a central subject. So you cannot impose agricultural income. It cannot.
No, again, Rahul is right. It's because it's politics, but it doesn't fully explain to me why a government with such a mandate cannot say in ATC, other than Provident Fund, everything else is going to be taxable. It's going to be part of your income.
But why would you force me to put it only in Provident Fund?
Fair enough. I mean, Provident Fund I can understand till some extent it's politically touchy, nobody wants to touch it. But beyond that.
This is what are called small saving schemes. And these are the schemes that attract a lot of tax incentives or small savings. Large part of, not large, but some part of the government's fiscal deficit, that is the borrowing bit, is also funded from this money. And there are legacy issues here. So you cannot just do away with it saying that no, from tomorrow onwards or next year onwards, we are not going to, we don't need this money. The government also needs this money because the government dips into household savings to fund part of its, fiscal deficit. And that is where the problem is.
Okay, we've got less than 10 minutes, 7 minutes now before the finance minister rises up.
Can I just give you two numbers, two trends? I just calculated them last night. And we were talking about Sensex, right? So markets, India has over the past 5 years, the markets have risen by, they have almost doubled, 95%. Compared to others, if you look at Japan, US, France, Germany, they are 73, 52, 52. So India has outperformed the entire world in terms of markets returns. On currencies, India is down 16%, which is less than South Korea, Brazil, Japan, Russia. So I think financially, when you look at markets and not just stock markets, but also currency markets, India has done a very good job at the top level where a lot of money management, global inflows, outflows happen. Despite the fact that so many FIIs sold Indian equities, nothing happened to the Sensex other than 400-500 points because now the Indian investors are now coming in through systematic investment plans. So I think this tells me that there is a large chunk of people. Somebody mentioned about how Uttar Pradesh had the maximum number of investors. Than even, I see a large and an increasing chunk of Indian population taking to the financial sector, and that's a very good. The financialization that began at the bottom with payments is also now coming in sophisticated markets like equity markets.
But how does one convert this? So you have at the top end, the markets are doing well. FIIs are investing, there is FDI coming in, I think it's at record 600 billion plus or whatever. But at the same time, at the bottom end of the pyramid, as Rahul keeps saying, why are you then extending free food subsidy for another 5 years? Because clearly there's a problem at the bottom end of the pyramid. How do you match the gap?
See, I think, quite frankly, I think there are two different issues. Because at the end of the day, a subsidy, removing a subsidy, whether I don't think that will ever go because there is a political motivation to actually holding these subsidies. And apart from these three, there are a whole lot of other subsidies. These are your bulk, but there are a whole lot of other subsidies that exist where they've kind of...
I'm coming to it from a political point of view. For years now, we've heard PDS is broken, PDS is broken, PDS is broken. You're using the same PDS for the next 5 years. Reform it.
I agree. I think PDS requires a lot of reform, but that also means that you need, so hopefully these are the things that the government will do over the next 5 years. See, if anything, I think this government has had a vision because somewhere in their head they have kind of figured, right or wrong, they've said that we're going to be here for the next 10 years, next 15 years, whichever way. So they've had a strategy there. But PDS reform, of course, is important. They need to do that. And if you are able to reduce your food subsidy because of that, so be it. But it's still a very, in a country where farm laws actually got what happened, PDS reform is going to be an even bigger issue. It's very touchy.
I think there are two conflicting political economies fighting with each other.
The reluctance to do this is a dead giveaway that there is a problem. Now we can skirt around it. The government can give us alternative figures. There is a problem. It needs to be fixed.
No, I'm not saying what is the problem, Rahul? The government at 303 can't do it. How do you expect a government at 250 to do it?
Because there is still have state government, too many stakeholders.
There is a huge amount of distress. You have, a private consumption which contributes 61% of GDP, right? 61% of GDP, is not coming through the rural areas.
No, but it doesn't correspond with other markers. For example, as Nalan said, if more people are investing in the stock markets from Uttar Pradesh, these two are contradictory.
But are we suggesting that they are the rural poor? We have 45% of our population which is below, which is subsistence.
You must have seen this. I'm sure you got this data point as well. The government put out that multidimensional poverty has shrunk from 28% to 11%. Again, you can argue with the figures. We don't know the
base, and if the base is...
I think as far as political economy goes, there are two colliding bombs with each other. One is that MSP needs to rise. The other is that food prices need to fall.
Come down,
and these, the balancing of these two colliding and conflicting political economy tools is where every government has been
the other
stranded
thing is there is a difference between saying do away with PDS and reform PDS. I think that's where it is. No, I don't think you should be doing away with it, but I think there's a better way of actually administering it.
Till you have the levels of poverty you have in this country, you have to have welfareism. And it can be merit-based, it has to be merit-based.
Okay. I've just got an update. I think the Prime Minister has spoken in Parliament. I think he's given a soundbite saying that the interim budget is for the masses. Now, what are you going to make of that, Rahul?
The 4 C's that he has talked about. The Yuva, the women, and the farmers,
and the youth.
And the youth.
And the poor.
And the poor.
So when he says it's for the masses, are we expecting some kind of tax structure change? Are we expecting more subsidies? Kisan Samman Nidhi, Ayushman Bharat? What are we talking about?
Clearly, Kisan Samman Nidhi is up for an appraisal. I would not be surprised it goes up upwards of 8,000 or close to 9,000. 50% rise in 5 years is, I think, inflation index, and that should come up.
Because it's just allocation.
And a Vision 2047 vision statement is going to be laid out comprehensively. With Viksit Bharat, I think, is going to be the key word in this budget speech, along with Gyan, Garib, Yuva, Annadata, and Nari Shakti.
I would add to the point Gaurav is making also the insurance scheme on that and PM Awas. So I think there will be a significant amount of welfareism in the budget and so a lot of optics around that and it will be framed around the 4 C's as Rahul is saying. Something around infrastructure, both government and to increase private sector.
All right, so a budget for the masses is what the Prime Minister has said. How is he? I mean, Mr. Modi is part welfarist, part capitalist, part reformer. I mean, how are you going to capture what he stands for as an economic, agent?
So this has been a long debate about the BJP being a right-wing party, right? But economically on the record of the last 8, 9, 10, a lot of people thought Mr. Modi is going to be like a Thatcher or a Ronald Reagan when he came to power in 2014. But actually, he's favoured the big state. He's focused on creating a welfare state Mark II, if you like, and expanded the
remarkable similarities between.
So in fact, these categories of left and right, which are really Western categories, don't necessarily apply in this case because economically he's very much left of center.
And there's been an upgradation of UPA.
There's
been an upgradation of UPA's thrust.
It's the last 30 seconds, so we can go full frame to the pictures that we're getting from the Lok Sabha. Mega update before the budget. The Prime Minister says it's going to be a budget for the masses, and why not? It is going to be an election year budget. It's a budget that's coming 2 months before the big summer election where the Modi government 2.0 is expecting to be voted back.
That he's now not going to be satisfied with 303. He's going for, as someone said, 400. That's right, 400.
Okay.
400 par is bar.
Let's see if this budget provides that fillip for a 400 par. But politically, the math does seem difficult to get to of 400 par. They have to make significant inroads in the eastern belt, in the southern belt. But that's a matter for another day. Today, it's all about the budget, and it's the budget for the masses is what the Prime Minister is saying. Let's see what we get from that budget. Is it going to be increased subsidies for farmers, for Yuva, for women, and of course for the young people? So these are the 4 pillars that have been identified by the Modi government. Let's cut live now.
माननीय सदस्यगण, आपको बुलेटिन भाग 2 के माध्यम से पहले ही सूचित किया गया है कि माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी के बजट भाषण की प्रतियां आपको हार्ड कॉपी के रूप में उपलब्ध कराई जाएगी। अतः बजट प्रस्तुत हो जाने के पश्चात माननीय सदस्य बजट भाषण की प्रति प्रकाशन काउंटर से प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। आपको ये भी सूचित किया जाता है कि माननीय मंत्री द्वारा बजट प्रस्तुत किए जाने के पश्चात उसे मेंबर पोर्टल पर भी उपलब्ध करा दिया जाएगा। माननीय वित्त मंत्री जी,
Honorable Speaker, I present the interim budget for 24-25. The Indian economy has witnessed profound positive transformation in the last 10 years. The people of India are looking ahead to the future with hope and optimism. With the blessings of the people, when our government, under the visionary and dynamic leadership of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi, assumed office in 2014, the country was facing enormous challenges. With Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas as its mantra, the government overcame those challenges in right earnest. Structural reforms were undertaken. Pro-people programs were formulated and implemented promptly. Conditions were created for more opportunities for employment and entrepreneurship. The economy got a new vigor. The fruits of development started reaching the people at scale. The country got a new sense of purpose and hope. Naturally, the people blessed the government with a bigger mandate. In the second term, our government, under the leadership of Honorable Prime Minister, doubled down on its responsibilities to build a prosperous country with comprehensive development of all people and all regions. Our government strengthened its mantra to Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas and Sabka Vishwas. Our development philosophy covered all elements of inclusivity, namely social inclusivity through coverage of all strata of the society, and geographical inclusivity through development of all regions of the country. With the whole of nation approach of Sabka Prayas, the country overcame the challenges of once-in-a-century pandemic, took long strides towards Atmanirbhar Bharat, committed to Panch Pran, and laid solid foundations for the Amrit Kal. As a result, our young country has high aspirations, pride in its present, and hope and confidence for a bright future. We expect that our government, based on its stupendous work, will be blessed again by the people with a resounding mandate. Inclusive development and growth. Our humane and inclusive approach to development is a marked and deliberate departure from the earlier approach of provisioning up to village level. Development programs were thus provisioned. In the last 10 years, however, have targeted each and every household and individual through housing for all, Har Ghar Jal, electricity for all, cooking gas for all, bank accounts and financial services for all in record time. The worries about food have been eliminated through free ration for 80 crore people. Minimum support prices for the produce of Annadata are periodically increased appropriately. These and the provision of basic necessities have enhanced real income in the rural areas. Their economic needs could be addressed, thus spurring growth and generating jobs. Social justice. Our government is working with an approach to development that is all-round, all-pervasive, and all-inclusive. Sarvangin, Sarvasparshi, or Sarvasamaveshi. It covers all castes and people at all levels. We are working to make India a Vikasit Bharat by 2047. For achieving that goal, we need to improve people's capability and empower them. Previously, social justice was mostly a political slogan. For our government, social justice is an effective and necessary governance model. The saturation approach of covering all eligible people is the true and comprehensive achievement of social justice. This is secularism in action, reduces corruption, and prevents nepotism, prevents Bhai Bhatijawad. There is transparency and assurance that benefits are delivered to all eligible people. The resources are distributed fairly. All, regardless of their social standing, get access to opportunities. We are addressing systemic inequalities that had plagued our society. We focus on outcomes and not on outlays, so that the social economic transformation is achieved. As our Prime Minister firmly believes, we need to focus on 4 major castes. They are Garib, Mahilayein, Yuva, and Annadata. Their needs, their aspirations, and their welfare are our highest priority. The country progresses when they progress. All 4 require and receive government support in their quest to better their lives. Their empowerment and well-being will drive the country forward. Garib Kalyan, Desh Ka Kalyan. We believe in empowering the poor. The earlier approach of tackling poverty through entitlements had resulted in very modest outcomes. When the poor became empowered partners in the development process, government's power to assist them also increases manifold. With the pursuit of Sabka Saath, in these 10 years, the government has assisted 25 crore people to get freedom from multi-dimensional poverty. Our government's efforts are now getting synergized with energy and passion of such empowered people. This is truly elevating them from poverty. Direct benefit transfer of 34 lakh crore rupees from the government using PM Jan Dhan accounts has led to savings of 2.7 lakh crores of rupees for the government. This savings has been realized through avoidance of leakages prevalent earlier. The savings have helped in providing more funds for Garib Kalyan. PM Swanidhi has provided credit assistance to 78 lakh street vendors. From that total of 78 lakh street vendors, 2.3 lakh have received credit for the 3rd time. PM Janman Yojana reaches out to the particularly vulnerable tribal groups who have remained outside the realm of development so far. PM Vishwakarma Yojana provides end-to-end support to artisans and craftspeople engaged in 18 trades. The schemes for empowerment of Divyangs and transgender persons reflect firm resolve of our government to leave no one behind. Welfare of Annadata. Farmers are our Annadata. Every year under PM Kisan Samman Yojana, direct financial assistance is provided to 11.8 crore farmers, including marginal and small farmers. Crop insurance is given to 4 crore farmers under PM Fasal Bima Yojana. These, besides several other programs, are assisting Annadata in producing food for the country and for the world. Electronic National Agricultural Market has integrated 1,361 mandis and is providing services to 1.8 crore farmers with trading volume of 3 lakh crores of rupees. The sector is poised for inclusive, balanced, higher growth and productivity. These are facilitated from farmer-centric policies, income support, coverage of risks through price and insurance support, promotion of technologies and innovations through startups. Empowering the Amrit PD, the Yuva. Our prosperity depends on adequately equipping and empowering the youth. The National Education Policy 2020 is ushering the transformational reforms. PM Schools for Rising India, PM Shri, are delivering quality teaching and nurturing holistic and well-rounded individuals. The Skill India mission has trained 1.4 crore youth, upskilled and reskilled 54 lakh youth, and established 3,000 new ITIs. A large number of institutions of higher learning, namely 7 IITs, 16 triple ITs, 7 IIMs, 15 AIMS, and 390 universities have been set up. PM Mudra Yojana has sanctioned 43 crore loans aggregating to 22.5 lakh crores of rupees for entrepreneurial aspirations of our youth. Besides that, Fund of Funds, Startup India, and Startup Credit Guarantee schemes are assisting our youth. They are also becoming Rozgar Data. The country is proud of our youth scaling new heights in sports. The highest ever medal tally in Asian Games and Asian Para Games in 2023 reflects a high confidence level. Chess prodigy and our #1 ranked player Pragnananda put up a stiff fight against the reigning world champion Magnus Carlsen in 2023. Today, India has over 80 chess grandmasters compared to little over 20 in 2010. Momentum for Nari Shakti. The empowerment of women through entrepreneurship, ease of living, and dignity for them has gained momentum in these 10 years. 30 crore Mudra Yojana loans have been given to women entrepreneurs. Female enrollment in higher education has gone up by 28% in 10 years. In STEM courses, girls and women constitute 43% of enrollment, one of the highest in the world. All these measures are getting reflected in the increasing participation of women in workforce. Making triple talaq illegal, reservation of 1/3 seats for women in the Lok Sabha and state assemblies, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women, and giving over 70% houses under PM Awas Yojana in rural areas to women as sole or joint owners have enhanced their dignity. Exemplary track record of governance, development, and performance. Besides delivering on high growth in terms of gross domestic product, the government is equally focused on a more comprehensive GDP, that is, governance, development, and performance. Our government has provided transparent, accountable, people-centric, and prompt, trust-based administration with citizen-first and minimum government, maximum governance approach. The impact of all-round development is discernible in all sectors. There is macroeconomic stability, including in the external sector. Investments are robust. The economy is doing well. People are living better and earning better, with even greater aspirations for future. Average real income of the people has increased by 50%. Inflation is moderate. People are getting empowered, equipped, and enabled to pursue their aspirations. There is effective and timely delivery of programs and of large projects. Economic management. The multi-pronged economic management over the past 10 years has complemented people-centric, inclusive development. Following are some of the major elements. 1. All forms of infrastructure, physical, digital, or social, are being built in record time. Number 2, all parts of the country are becoming active participants in economic growth. Number 3, digital public infrastructure, a new factor of production as if in the 21st century, is instrumental in formalization of the economy. Number 4, goods and services tax has enabled one nation, one market, one tax. Tax reforms have led to deepening and widening of tax base. Number 5, strengthening of the financial sector has helped in making savings, credit, and investments more efficient. Number 6, GIFT, IFSC, and the Unified Regulatory Authority, IFSCA, are creating a robust gateway for global capital and financial services for the economy. Number 7, proactive inflation management has helped keep inflation within the policy band. Now, the global context, Honorable Speaker, sir. Geopolitically, global affairs are becoming more complex and challenging with wars and conflicts. Globalization is being redefined with reshoring and friendshoring, disruption and fragmentation of supply chains, and competition for critical minerals and technologies. A new world order is emerging after the COVID pandemic. India assumed the G20 presidency during very difficult times for the world. The global economy was going through high inflation, high interest rates, low growth, very high public debt, low trade growth, and climate changes. The pandemic has led to a crisis of food, fertilizer, fuel, and finances for the world, while India successfully navigated its way. The country showed the way forward and built consensus on solutions for those global problems. The recently announced India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor is a strategic and economic game changer for India and others. In the words of Honorable Prime Minister, the corridor, and I quote, will become the basis of world trade for hundreds of years to come, and history will remember that this corridor was initiated on Indian soil, unquote. Vision for Vikasit Bharat. Our vision for Vikasit Bharat is that of prosperous Bharat in harmony with nature, with modern infrastructure, and providing opportunities for all citizens and all regions to reach their potential. With confidence arising from strong and exemplary track record of performance and progress, earning Sabka Vishwas, the next 5 years will be years of unprecedented development and golden moments to realize the dream of developed India by 2047. The trinity of demography, democracy, and diversity backed by Sabka Prayas has the potential to fulfill aspirations of every Indian. As Honorable Prime Minister in his Independence Day address to the nation mentioned, I quote, "There is no dearth of opportunities, as many opportunities as we want. The country is capable of creating more opportunities. Sky is the limit," unquote. Strategy for Amrit Kal. Our government will adopt economic policies that foster and sustain growth, facilitate inclusive and sustainable development, improve productivity, create opportunities for all, help them enhance their capabilities, and contribute to generation of resources to power investments and fulfill aspirations. Guided by the principle, reform, perform, and transform, the government will take up next generation reforms and build consensus with the states and stakeholders for effective implementation. It is an important policy priority for our government to ensure timely and adequate finances, relevant technologies, and appropriate training for the micro, small, and medium enterprises, MSMEs, to grow and also compete globally. Orienting the regulatory environment to facilitate their growth will be an important element of this policy mix. Aligning with the Panchamrit goals, our government will facilitate sustaining high and more resource-efficient economic growth. This will work towards energy security in terms of availability, accessibility, and affordability. For meeting the investment needs, our government will prepare the financial sector in terms of size, capacity, skills, and regulatory framework. Aspirational Districts Program. Our government stands ready to assist the states in faster development of aspirational districts and blocks, including generation of ample economic opportunities. Development of the East. Our government will pay utmost attention to make the eastern region and its people a powerful driver of India's growth. PM Awas Yojana Gramin. Despite the challenges due to COVID, implementation of PM Awas Yojana Gramin continued, and we are close to achieving the target of 3 crore houses. 2 crore more houses will be taken up in the next 5 years to meet the requirement arising from increase in the number of families. Rooftop solarization and Muft Bijli. Through rooftop solarization, 1 crore households will be enabled to obtain up to 300 units free electricity every month. This scheme follows the resolve of Honorable Prime Minister on the historic day of consecration of Sri Ram Mandir in Ayodhya. Following benefits are expected. Savings up to 15 to 18,000 rupees annually for households from free solar electricity and selling the surplus to the distribution companies. Charging of electric vehicles. Entrepreneurship opportunities for a large number of vendors for supply and installation. Employment opportunities for the youth with technical skills in manufacturing, installation, and maintenance. Housing for middle class. Our government will launch a scheme to help deserving sections of the middle class, and I quote from Honorable Prime Minister's words, living in rented houses or slums or chawls and unauthorized colonies, unquote, to buy or build their own houses. Medical colleges. Several youth are ambitious to get qualified as doctors. They aim to serve our people through improved healthcare services. Our government plans to set up more medical colleges by utilizing the existing hospital infrastructure under various departments. A committee for this purpose will be set up to examine the issues and make relevant recommendations. Cervical cancer vaccination. Our government will encourage vaccination for girls in the age group of 9 to 14 years for prevention of cervical cancer. Maternal and child health care. Various schemes for maternal and child care will be brought under one comprehensive program for synergy in implementation. Upgradation of Anganwadi centers under Saksham Anganwadi and Poshan 2.0 will be expedited for improved nutrition delivery, early childhood care and development. The newly designed U-Win platform for managing immunization and intensified efforts of Mission Indradhanush will be rolled out expeditiously throughout the country. Ayushman Bharat. Healthcare cover under Ayushman Bharat scheme will be extended to all ASHA workers, to all Anganwadi workers and helpers. Agriculture and food processing. The efforts of value addition in agriculture sector and boosting farmers' incomes will be stepped up. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Sampada Yojana has benefited 38 lakh farmers and generated 10 lakh employment. Pradhan Mantri Formalization of Micro Food Processing Enterprises Yojana has assisted 2.4 lakh SHGs and 60,000 individuals with credit linkages. Other schemes are complementing the efforts for reducing post-harvest losses and improving productivity and incomes. For ensuring faster growth of the sector, our government will further promote private and public investment in post-harvest activities, including aggregation, modern storage, efficient supply chains, primary and secondary processing and marketing and branding. Nano DAP. After the successful adoption of nano urea, application of nano DAP on various crops will be expanded in all agroclimatic zones. Atmanirbhar Oil Seeds Abhiyan. Building on the initiative announced in 2022, a strategy will be formulated to achieve Atmanirbharta for oil seeds such as mustard, groundnut, sesame, soya bean, and sunflower. This will cover research for high-yielding varieties, widespread adoption of modern farming techniques, market linkages, procurement, value addition, and crop insurance. Dairy development. A comprehensive program for supporting dairy farmers will be formulated. Efforts are already on to control foot and mouth disease. India is the world's largest milk producer but with low productivity of milch animals. The program will be built on the success of existing schemes such as Rashtriya Gokul Mission, National Livestock Mission, and infrastructure development funds for dairy processing and animal husbandry. Matsya Sampada. It was a government which set up a separate department for fisheries, realizing the importance of assisting fishermen. This has resulted in doubling of both inland and aquaculture production. Seafood exports since 2013-14 has also doubled. Implementation of Pradhan Mantri Matsya Sampada Yojana will be stepped up to 1. Enhance aquaculture productivity from existing 3 to 5 tons per hectare. 2. Double exports to 1 lakh crore rupees, and 3. Generate 55 lakh employment opportunities in the near future. 5 integrated aqua parks will also be set up. Lakpati Didi. 83 lakh SHGs. 83 lakh SHGs with 9 crore women are transforming rural socio-economic landscape with empowerment and self-reliance. Honorable Speaker, sir, their success has assisted nearly 1 crore women to become Lakpati Didi already. They are an inspiration to others. Their achievements will be recognized through honoring them. Buoyed by the success, it has been decided to enhance the target for Lakpati Didi from 2 crores to 3 crores. Technological changes, new age technologies and data are changing the lives of people and businesses. They are also enabling new economic opportunities and facilitating provision of high quality services at affordable prices for all, including those at the bottom of the pyramid. Opportunities for India at the global level are expanding. India is showing solutions through innovation and entrepreneurship of its people. Research and innovation for catalyzing growth, employment, and development. Prime Minister Shastri, Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri gave the slogan of Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan. Prime Minister Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji, made that Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan. Prime Minister Modi has furthered that to Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and Jai Anusandhan, as innovation is the foundation of development. For our tech-savvy youth, this will be a golden era. A corpus of 1 lakh crore rupees will be established with 50-year interest-free loan provided. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low and or nil. I repeat that sentence. The corpus will provide long-term financing or refinancing with long tenors and low or nil interest rates. This will encourage the private sector to scale up research and innovation significantly in sunrise domains. We need to have programs that combine the powers of our youth and technology. A new scheme will be launched for strengthening deep tech technologies for defense purposes and expediting Atmanirbharta. Infrastructure development. Building on the massive tripling of the capital expenditure outlay in the past 4 years, resulting in huge multiplier impact on economic growth and employment creation, the outlay for the next year is being increased by 11.1% to 11,111 crore rupees. This would be 3.4% of our GDP. Railways. 3 major railway corridor programs will be implemented. These are energy, mineral, and cement corridor. Number 2, port connectivity corridors. And number 3, high traffic density corridors. The projects have been identified under the PM Gati Shakti for enabling multimodal connectivity. They will improve logistics efficiency and reduce cost. The resultant decongestion of the high traffic corridors will also help in improving operations of passenger trains, resulting in safety and higher travel speed for passengers. Together with dedicated freight corridors, these three economic corridor programs will accelerate our GDP growth and reduce logistic costs. "40,000 normal rail bogies will be converted to Vande Bharat standards to enhance safety, convenience, and comfort of passengers." Aviation sector. The aviation sector has been galvanized in the past 10 years. Number of airports have doubled to 149. Rollout of air connectivity to Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities under UDAN scheme has been widespread. 517 new routes are carrying 1.3 crore passengers. Indian carriers have proactively placed orders for over 1,000 new aircrafts. Expansion of existing airports and development of new airports will continue expeditiously. Metro and Namo Bharat. We have a fast expanding middle class and rapid urbanization is taking place. Metro rail and Namo Bharat can be the catalyst for the required urban transformation. Expansion of these systems will be supported in large cities, focusing on transit-oriented development. Green energy. Towards meeting our commitment for net zero by 2070, the following measures will be taken. Viability gap funding will be provided for harnessing offshore wind energy, potential for initial capacity of 1 gigawatt. Coal gasification and liquefaction capacity of 100 metric tons will be set up by 2030. This will also help in reducing imports of natural gas, methanol, and ammonia. Phased mandatory blending of compressed biogas in compressed natural gas for transport and piped natural gas for domestic purposes will be mandated. Financial assistance will be provided for procurement of biomass aggregation machinery to support collection. Electric vehicle ecosystem. Our government will expand this and strengthen the e-vehicle ecosystem by supporting manufacturing and charging infrastructure. Greater adoption of e-buses for public transport networks will be encouraged through payment security mechanism. Biomanufacturing and biofoundry. For promoting green growth, a new scheme of biomanufacturing and biofoundry will be launched. This will provide environment-friendly alternatives such as biodegradable polymers, bioplastics, biopharmaceuticals, and bioagri inputs. This scheme will also help in transforming today's consumptive manufacturing paradigm to the one based on regenerative principles. Blue Economy 2.0. For promoting climate resilient activities for Blue Economy 2.0, a scheme for restoration and adaptation measures and coastal aquaculture and mariculture with integrated and multi-sectoral approach will be launched. Comprehensive development of tourist centers. The success of organizing G20 meetings in 60 places presented diversity of India to global audience. Our economic strength has made the country an attractive destination for business and conference tourism. Our middle class also now aspires to travel and explore. Tourism, including spiritual tourism, has tremendous opportunities for local entrepreneurship. States will be encouraged to take up comprehensive development of iconic tourist centers, branding and marketing them at global scale. A framework for rating of the centers based on quality of facilities and services will be established. Long-term interest-free loans will be provided to states for financing such development on matching basis. To address the emerging fervor for domestic tourism, Honorable Speaker, sir, projects for port connectivity, tourism infrastructure, and amenities will be taken up on our islands, including Lakshadweep. This will help in generating employment also. Promoting investments. The FDI inflow during 2014 to 23 was $596 billion, marking a golden era. That is twice the inflow during 2005 to 14. For encouraging sustained foreign investment, we are negotiating bilateral investment treaties with our foreign partners in the spirit of First Develop India. FDI is First Develop India. Reforms in the states for Vikasit Bharat. Many growth and development enabling reforms are needed in the states for realizing the vision of Vikasit Bharat. A provision of 75,000 crore rupees as 50-year interest-free loan is proposed this year to support those milestone-linked reforms by the state governments. Societal changes. The government will form a high-powered committee for an extensive consideration of the challenges arising from fast population growth and demographic changes. The committee will be mandated to make recommendations for addressing these challenges comprehensively in relation to the goal of Vikasit Bharat. Amrit Kal as Kartavya Kal. Our government stands committed to strengthening and expanding the economy with high growth and to create conditions for people to realize their aspirations. Honorable Prime Minister in his Independence Day address to the nation in the 75th year of our Republic said, and I quote, "We commit ourselves to national development with new inspirations, new consciousness, new resolutions as the country opens up immense possibilities and opportunities. It is our Kartavya Kal." Unquote. Every challenge of the pre-2014 era was overcome through our economic management and our governance. These have placed the country on a resolute path of sustained high growth. This has been possible through right policies, true intentions, and appropriate decisions. In the full budget in July, Honorable Speaker, our government will present a detailed roadmap for our pursuit of Vikasit Bharat. Revised estimates of 2023-24. The revised estimate of the total receipts other than borrowings is 27.56 lakh crores of rupees